Okay, here we go. So, the end of May is upon us, and so far this year, we have seen so much chaos basically in sport. If you look at it, if you're in the real sense of the word, the Israel Folau saga has been dominating the headlines around the world. The Premier League title going to Man City, they got their domestic treble. Liverpool in their second successive Champions League final. Arsenal and Chelsea fans being really disappointed with how UEFA and their clubs have handled the ticketing arrangements, travel arrangements of the fans, and the Europa League finals I think going to dominate this Q&A because half the tickets allocated to the clubs have been returned. Chelsea fans and Chelsea supporters groups have criticised the club for their poor handling of things. An Arsenal player can't go for safety reasons, and Wednesday next week is going to be a really interesting final. Really interesting final. The Cricket World Cup. Pakistan lost a warm-up game to Afghanistan. To be fair with the Cricket World Cup, I did see advertising for the Cricket World Cup a couple months back on the side of buses. I was in a job interview and I was getting public transport, and I was walking back to the train station where I had to get a train from, and a local bus had the Cricket World Cup advertised for tickets on the side of the bus. I don't know what's going to happen with Owen Morgan, breaking his hand, and I think it's a thumb fracture. That's going to be interesting. But the thing is, in this country, in the UK, there's not enough cricket on free. There's no cricket on free-to-air TV. That's a big problem. If you want to sell the sport to the wider public and say this is a World Cup, we have a chance of winning this tournament. The TV rights issue that the ECB has created over the last 14 years has actually harmed the growth of the sport, and it's going to be interesting to see what the crowds are like. It's going to be interesting to see how the team performs. The Australian side of things, they've obviously brought Warner and Smith back in. And Warner and Smith, I mean, that's a hot potato. Australian sport the last couple of years has been littered with scandal and negative press. And it's culminated in the last few months with Israel Folau and Jack de Belin as the two big stories in Australian sport for scandal and negativity. Australia needs a good World Cup in the sense for the cricket to say, look, we've recovered from last year's ball tampering. We've recovered from the poor toxic atmosphere. We've rebuilt the trust in the side. England, they need to win because they're the hosts and we invented the sport. And if we fail in this World Cup badly and fail to go far in the tournament, the TV rights issue won't go away. The issues with encouraging young people to play won't go away. This 100-ball format needs to be dropped, but the ECB are pushing ahead with it. So this World Cup for cricket is actually really, really important. But there are so many issues with cricket at the moment worldwide, with corruption scandals and allegations of match fixing, and there's documentaries highlighting certain nations involved. And cricket needs a positive World Cup, but they're also at the same time this year going to be competing against Major League Baseball, having two games at the London City Stadium between the Yankees and the Red Sox. That's going to be interesting to see how well those games are how the fans react to that, considering that Major League Baseball said it would come in 2017 and pulled out the last minute. So that damaged the Major League Baseball brand. They've got the Women's Football World Cup in France, which is going to be more accessible to watch for fans. And people are saying, well, the T20 World Cup should expand, all this, and cricket should expand. It needs to expand, yes, but it needs to also look at the television rights it has in place with host broadcasters in host countries and make it as accessible as possible. Because in the UK, it's behind a paywall, and that puts off so many people from wanting to engage in the sport. It makes the sport seem elitist and not for the working classes, which is false, because so many working class lads and girls play the sport. But it's the public perception that the sport is seen as snobbish, elitist, and out of touch, and we're seeing it now with other sports that are more working class orientated, where like football is completely inaccessible now for your average working class fan. They cannot afford to go. Just look at the Europa League final and the ticket pricing for the Europa League final at £5,500 a ticket. I don't know where you're from, but you equivalent £5,500 via exchange rate to whatever currency you use in your home country. That is a lot of money. That's like 4 or 5 months' wages for some people. That for me would be 4 months' wages if I worked every available hour that I could on my contract. I could not afford to go to the if let's say as I'm a Blackburn fan. If you follow the channel for long enough, I'm a Blackburn fan. Let's say Blackburn get back to the Premier League. Let's say Blackburn get back to the Premier League, okay? And let's say we win the League Cup or the FA Cup, okay? And we get into Europe, and then we get to a European final. I cannot afford to go to watch my team play. The last time I watched my team play was, I think, 14 years ago. It is unaffordable because they're not also taking into consideration the travel costs, hotels if you've got a lengthy away trip, food, drink, everything. It's it's mad, and it's the same with cricket. Cricket prices. The last time I went to a test match, it was affordable. And then last year when England played India in the summer, I had an Indian subscriber ask, how much I would have to pay, and I actually looked online. And before I even got to go to Lords, I was priced out. And I was a domestic home fan, and the away fans, the Indian fans, were paying double just to get a ticket. That's not including transport, hotel, food, drink, all that. That's where it's gone wrong. And that's where pay-per-view sport has gone horribly wrong because the players expect more money in their wages. And we were told this lie that pay-per-view sport would keep wages at sustainable levels, and that is a load of BS. Hey, Mike, it's been a while since I've seen you. Yeah, I mean, the Europa League final, I'm going to be watching it on YouTube because BT Sport, that's the only good thing about BT Sport is they do show the Europa League and Champions League finals live streamed on YouTube. So I can actually watch the game, criticise the broadcasting, and then dissect the match. The Arsenal and Chelsea fans have been screwed. Now, a lot of people in other areas of the UK saying, oh, well, they're rich boys from London. Actually, most of the Arsenal and Chelsea fans I know are working class lads who are either tradies, who own their own businesses, or, plasterers, plumbers, electricians. They're not on big money. They cannot afford to go. They can't even afford to take the holiday to go because they're on building site projects all around the southeast of England. They're like halfway up a building, put plaster on the wall. They're halfway in a cellar putting electrics together. They can't afford to go. Those fans that have been able to afford to at least buy a ticket can't even get to the game. And half the tickets that have been allocated, the small, minuscule amount, they've given back. So this Europa League final is going to be shit. It's going to be shit not to watch, I would say, on the telly, but it's going to be a crap atmosphere. It's going to be, 54,000 corporate tickets sold, or tickets sold to local fans at significantly reduced prices, because the locals, they're probably going to pay like a fiver to get in. And the fact it's closer to Tehran, okay, than Berlin, if you think about it, that's you're closer to Central Asia than you are to Lisbon. It's insane. 59 hours driving. You would have to leave now. You would actually have to leave now to make sure you have enough stop-offs to get there. You would have to leave this weekend. That's not right. £5,500 a ticket. Like, I know, like big sporting events that you want to pay for the quality, but £5,500. That's 3, 4, 5 months' wages for some people. I don't think UEFA has fully realised the implications of putting a final in basically the edge of Asia. Technically, Azerbaijan is not even technically part of Europe, but it is for political reasons, but geographically it's part of that. It's mad. And £5,500 a ticket. It's like, who's going to have that? Where has that money been? Because if what I can remember for the last 11 years, there's been economic crisis after economic crisis, and wages have stagnated, and no one's making any bloody money apart from the top 2% of the population. And wage rises have been limited. I'm not making that much money. I'm making a decent wage now with the job I do, but I'm not making that much bloody money. And that's wrong. And the Chelsea fans have come out in the last 24 hours, the Fans Association, and they complained to the club about the club's handling of arranging transportation and making sure the fans are looked after to and from the game, and they're safe. And they've criticised Chelsea for the preparations that Chelsea Football Club have put in place. That says something. Now, I'm not a fan of Chelsea. Their players, their managers, the way the club's run, or a minority of their fans. But the average Chelsea fan, I know loads of Chelsea fans where I live in my part of the UK. Most of them are, they either own their own businesses, like they're traders, so they're tradesmen, they're like plumbers, electricians, plasterers. They own their own businesses, or they are they work for a small company, like as plasterers, traders. They're on building sites right now. They're halfway up a building. They can't afford to take 4 or 5 days off because that's putting money in their pocket and a roof over their kids' heads and all that stuff. So it's wrong. It is wrong. And I use the example if I keep using this example. If let's say Hereford ever got back in the Football League and all that, and 10, 15, 20 years down the line, they were to make a European Cup final, say with Blackburn or any club that has been at a higher level that has slipped back down. If the dream was to come true and they were to reach the promised land of the Premier League and get through to one of these European type cup finals, or even the FA Cup final, which has been criticised in recent years, average fans can't afford to go. The amount of corporate tickets at stadiums is not good. And when you put sports behind a paywall, we were always told the lie that it would benefit the sport, which it hasn't, and fans could still afford to go, which it hasn't. Player wages are now out of control. Player transfers are now out of control. I mean, they're valuing Eden Hazard at £150 million on Chelsea if he is sold. Wilfred Zaha is valued at £70 to £90 million. That's massively overinflated. It's just a bloke who kicks a ball around. They might be very, very good at it and a lot better than I ever was, but 90 million quid? I'm sorry, 10 years ago, that was like the world record signing. Now that's seen as average fare on the transfer market. That's wrong. And part of the problem behind it is the sport has been put behind a paywall in so many countries for various games. Sometimes the whole season. Sometimes they have to share rights with free-to-air TV. But the players are demanding more money because of that TV money. And the clubs could let us in for free or very, very little, yet they still charge extortionate prices on the gate for what we're actually watching. Which, in my personal view, watching football as long as I have, I think the quality of the game is not as good as what it was in the late 90s, early 2000s. I think the actual quality of skill that we see on display, the quality that we see is lesser than what it was in the early 2000s. I honestly do believe that. I do honestly believe that. The flair has been coached out the Brazil national side, where you could actually cobble together 11 players from the Brazilian domestic league in the 70s and they could win a bloody World Cup because they had passion, pride, and they enjoyed playing for the national side, to antiseptic losing 7-1 to Germany at home, which is just unacceptable. I actually honestly believe the skill and quality level and the joy that players have has gone completely. And then that's why I watch other sports. I watched a lot of the World Championship ice hockey, especially the British games. Every time Britain scored, it was like we'd won the bloody thing. But when we were playing the Americans, especially, where it was a 6-3 game to the US, when the US players scored, they were like, okay, yeah, I've scored, yeah. British player scores, the players are all over the place. And then I looked at the salary gap. The British squad that was on the ice that day, they were paid a combined total of £500,000 in contract. The US squad was paid 84 point something million pounds for all their contracts per year. They only beat Great Britain by 3 goals. That's where wage inflation comes in. And the quality gap between certain leagues and individual players is not actually as big as people realise. But no, it's mad because I don't think this Europa League final is going to be the worst final we've ever seen. Nothing can be as bad as Man United Chelsea FA Cup final last year. Nothing can be as bad as that. But I do honestly think, as a sports fan, it's not going to be the highest quality final because both these clubs have regressed in the last 10 years. They're not as good as what they were. And not enough of their fans are going to be there to enjoy the occasion. Not enough. And UEFA has to hang their heads in shame because they decided back in 2017 to award this final to Baku in Azerbaijan, knowing full well that the likelihood of an Azerbaijani team or an Eastern European team from like Ukraine or Belarus getting that far were minimal. And that the most likely outcome was a Spanish, British, French, German, Italian team getting there. Maybe those kind of nations were going to be like the key nations to get there. And even if you're from Germany, you've still got to travel for 57 hours by bloody car or 54 hours by car to get to Azerbaijan. And if you're from somewhere like Spain or the UK, you've got to go going even further. And yeah, UEFA chose the oil money. And I honestly don't think it's right. It's like, I don't know how to describe it. I know like some leagues like Major League Baseball, the NFL, the NHL, they are taking games on the world tour to increase the participation in the sport because the US and Canada are the dominant nations in ice hockey and baseball and basketball and American and Canadian football. Absolutely. They want to sell their brand around the world. And I get that because their sports teams are franchise based, whereas European sports teams are more community club based. Well, I'm not a massive fan of it. I understand why they're doing it. But it is like basically saying we are taking a Premier League game or a La Liga game, which was the plan, from domestic cup competition to another country halfway around the world, which is what La Liga planned to do. And the players, even the players, were like, no. I think you can get to Azerbaijan on a budget. You just got to drive for 59 hours and make sure there's at least 5 of you in the car, possibly 6. Put a bloke in the footwell, and you can do it by virtue of every time you stop for fuel, the driver changes. The driver has a sleep. You rotate the driver. Everyone has to have a driving license, and you can get there. But you have to go via Turkey to avoid Ukraine and the border with Russia because you'll get shot. And then you have to go through Turkey and hope the Kurds and the Turks aren't blowing each other up and there isn't like a Syrian suicide bomber just to get to the final. It's like where they put it. Azerbaijan is in a semi-state of war with Armenia, hence why Henrik Mkhitaryan can't play because he could actually get murdered in the hotel. Azerbaijani nationalist right-wing, people don't like Armenians and vice versa. He could be gunned down in the street because he's just Armenian, not because anything else. And they chose a country which is in a semi-state of war with its neighbour over territorial landmass that no one's ever fucking heard of in the Caucasus. It's like giving the Champions League final to Grozny and hoping like Chechnya doesn't spark off because there's a Russian player on the pitch. It's mad. But yes, you can get there if you drive for 59 hours and hope you don't get deli belly on the way with the dirty water. But that's another thing. Don't drink the local water; you will shit yourself. Who can win the Champions League? I'm going for a Liverpool win because Tottenham have a big habit in big games of having that mental block, and it is a one-off game. There is no second leg, and Tottenham have proved this in the FA Cup semi-final last year. They've proved it in the league for the last 4 years. The Spurs players have this choking element. They haven't got over that line yet. And Pochettino's comments about the Real Madrid job, I don't think have helped. I think that's put the spotlight on the squad because he said that he would consider leaving if he wins the Champions League. And if he doesn't win, the pressure's back on because he's had so long there now and they failed so many times to get over the line. It's going to be a difficult one. It's not going to be easy for them. I think Liverpool, because they were there last year, they know what it takes to win silverware because the last time Tottenham won the league was a long time ago. Liverpool have won so much silverware since Tottenham last won any trophies. So, yeah. And Liverpool have that European mentality. The club, just the culture of the fibre of it. They've done it before. They've got to the Champions League final last year by winning big games. Now Tottenham have finally made a cup final, but they haven't got over that line yet. They failed in the league to win. They've not done the FA Cup. They got close last year, and then they chucked that away against a really poor Man United side. They were outplaying them for 25 minutes and stopped playing. They were, we won the game. They haven't. You've got a second half to play yet. They lost that. They completely melted. And a lot of these Tottenham players play for England, and they melted in the semi-final against Croatia. So there is a big game failure mentality-wise. The skill level's there. It's the mentality. If Pochettino cannot win this final or even be close, then questions will be asked. Look at their league position. They are far behind City and Liverpool. And you've got to look at Liverpool, how far ahead they are of Tottenham in third. They were 1 point off the title. Look how far the gap is between Man City and Liverpool and Spurs. It's huge. And Jurgen Klopp, I think, deserves a cup final win. He's been in, I think, 8 cup finals now, lost them all. I think he deserves a cup final win. And once he gets that first trophy for Liverpool, that will spark Liverpool to a league title campaign next year where they can push. Tottenham, they had a chance. If they won that FA Cup last year, that would be the springboard. They didn't. So I'm going for Liverpool because Liverpool are a team that has proven they can get to the final before. And actually being a chance of winning the final until that injury and that tackle and Gareth Bale. You take Gareth Bale out of that Champions League final, it's a different kettle of fish, but he turned up. The Champions League final, there's been questions about that as well, about the pricing of some of the tickets, but it's easier to access. It's an 18-hour drive if you want to drive and avoid the suddenly overinflated airline fees. Because obviously, guess what? The Champions in Europa League final take place school holidays, so the airlines put the prices up. Except they really marked the prices up because there were 2 European Cup finals that week, and the airlines have been criticised. UEFA have been criticised. Fan groups have criticised, and ticket prices have yet again, been criticised. But I will say this: the Champions League final is far easier. Champions League final was always going to be in a Western European city. It was never ever going to be in Eastern Europe. The Europa League final, the secondary competition, fans have been taking the piss out of yet again, and it hasn't. It's left that bitter taste with a lot of people, and UEFA's trust with the fans has been broken yet further. And the fact that this Euros coming up is going to be in multiple host cities and multiple host countries is going to make travel an absolute nightmare next summer. Next summer is going to be a nightmare, depending how far your country makes it. They brought this UEFA Nations League, which half the country can't watch because it's behind a paywall, and they took advantage of the fact that the TV companies took advantage of the fact that the resurgence in not just English football, but the Welsh get into the semi-finals of the last Euros. Northern Ireland and the Republic regularly qualifying for tournaments as well. They took advantage of that and went, Sky, do you want to have another football competition that we can rip fans off for stupid money? You do? Okay, cool. We'll sell you the rights, and then we can rip them off. While the quality of football of the Europa Nations League, UEFA Nations League has been decent, I haven't been able to access it because guess what? I don't want to pay an extra 30, 40 quid a month on a subscription package that I don't want and I don't need. This is what's happened with cricket 15 years ago. They saw what was happening with the surge in interest with the Ashes, and they went, oh yeah. And as soon as the Ashes was won, they signed that TV deal well quick. I've got the Australian ice hockey on YouTube. I follow that. US Major League Rugby's on YouTube. Although there is a geo block, so you have to watch the games a few days later, but they post full games on there. There's a few other bits and pieces you can get. I found a few other websites. There are a few pay websites where, if you live outside Australia, you can watch the NRL for a lot less that a year than a Sky TV or BT Sports subscription. I think it's 120 quid for a whole 12 months. I can watch every NRL game, State of Origin, and every Rugby League International for 120 quid a year. It's a lot less than a TV package. I'm tempted to get it, but it is still a large sum of money to pay out. But I'm tempted to get it because I bypass Sky, which I don't want. There are various packages out there, and there's various sports that have decided to use things like social media and to use things like joining up with free-to-air TV. We've seen it with the European Rugby. That was on Channel 4. The European Rugby finals was on Channel 4. So some sports have gone behind this paywall and have realised, actually, we're losing viewers. We're losing interest. In the long term, we're going to run out of fans because they're not going to want to pay. Oh yeah, we'll go back to a bit of free to air. So certain sports have decided, where they've been behind a paywall for club sport, they've gone, actually, that's a bad idea. We're going to put a few more club games drip feed onto free to air accessibility and social media, and we'll drip feed it back in. And they've worked out those games are more popular than the games behind the paywall. And they look at the viewing figures and they go, we've made a bit of a blunder here. The big games should be on free-to-air TV, and the games that are on the more accessible formats are watched more. Who would have thought that? It boggles my mind, the people who govern sport. They chase the money, but they actually, in chasing the money, have less people accessing the sport. It's mad. And yeah, I totally agree with the anti-gambling message. What worries me is even when I was watching the World Championship ice hockey, I missed one of the games between Great Britain and I think it was the US. So I watched it on Match Replay on Free Sports. So it's a few hours later. It's the full match, just the breaks are taken out and they made it 1 minute ad breaks, and you basically see the whole game without all the little ad breaks in. The little ad breaks they had in between the periods, where they would actually normally have 15 minutes to reset the ice, it was just a minute. Betting. It's a sport replay, but it was more than 90 minutes after the game finished. That's the loophole in the law. When I was watching the live games, not a single betting ad was on. When I watched the match replay of the US Great Britain match, which was 6 weeks to the US in the World Championship Ice Hockey, because it was more than 90 minutes after the actual live broadcasting finished, it's the full game at 90 minutes, ads for betting. There's a loophole in the law. I do like the fact that the amateur football, well, the amateur soccer or the amateur sports have an anti-gambling message. I do like that. And we can get into match fixing and the gambling message and what that actually means later on. Looking at Lossell to Everton, interesting because Jordan, I think he's a Danish international. Pickford, I think Pickford is very mistake prone. And I think the reason why Pickford got the number 1 shirt is Tom Heaton and Pope were both injured at Burnley. I honestly believe if they did not have the injuries at Burnley with their goalkeeping lineup, Pickford may not have kept his place. But Lossell still plays the Danish national side. He's still an international level goalkeeper. He's still being selected by his country and told, you're getting games. Regardless if he's the main starter or the secondary star, he's still getting games. And to be fair, in some games, he kept the games for Huddersfield closer than they should have been. If he's not in goal, they're conceding 10 goals a game. I think, he's international level standard. He may not be the starter for Denmark, but that's irrelevant. He's still getting selected for his national side. And the Danes are a decent side. He still kept Huddersfield in a lot of games, and he pulled off some miracles last season for Huddersfield before they got relegated. The season their first season in the Premier League, he pulled off some miracles in goal. I think Pickford, he is far, far too mistake prone at times. I honestly do believe that. From watching Pickford, every game I've seen in the FA Cup, or even for England, there is that flap in there. There is that he's not catching the ball, he's flapping at the ball. He doesn't command his area as much as some other goalkeepers that I've seen at top club level and international level. So when it comes to next year's Euros, and if England do qualify, which they're very likely to do so, I will be looking at Pickford and going, is Heaton or Pope? There are a few other goalkeepers that are coming through. I will be looking at how Southgate, who he puts in. If Pickford gets injured, who will be the number 2 coming in to be the number 1? And we'll have to look at Pickford's form, because while Southgate said he is my man, partly because of injuries forcing him to do that, I'm not sold on Jordan Pickford. And we'll see if how many games Lossell gets, because Lossell was a starter at Huddersfield. He's going to want to have the gloves. He's going to want to compete. That could mean Pickford could be on the way out. Just putting that out, though. I do honestly think Butland, he decided to stay at Stoke, so that's interesting. He's playing at a lower level, so that's an interesting one. If he was playing at a lower level for so long, Butland needs to be a number 1 at a club he plays at the top level. If that means he has to go into a European league to play, so be it. I do think the goalkeeping position for England is a bit of a problem, because you look at the clubs that are at the top end of the table in the European spaces. Not a single one has an English goalkeeper in net, apart from Watford, who narrowly missed out on Europe by losing the FA Cup final. If they won that, Wolves don't get in, and they're in. Ben Foster, he said he's always open to the idea of coming back, but the way he was treated while he was in the England squad was pretty bad. I think there is a lot of transfers that are happening, but there'll be so many to cover. I'm going to cover some of the big shocking ones. I do think Eden Hazard is leaving Chelsea. For how much, we'll find out. Wilfried Zaha, he's leaving Palace. But I do think the transfer market is stupidly overinflated. Absolutely. I think it's got out of control with the amount of money that players are transferred for. And I honestly think there has to be a breaking point. Has to be. But I don't want this podcast to be solely about European football, because I haven't been following football as much as I used to. I still watch the big internationals. I still watch the tournaments because they're fun, because you get to see players from all around the world that you don't normally see. But the concern I have is with the Champions League and the Europa League now on BT Sport, which is an abomination. And the fact that they only put the 2 finals on YouTube for to live stream, and then you can see how poor BT Sport's production values are and commentary teams are, and you see why people aren't buying BT Sport. That's harmed the game. MotoGP, BT Sport harmed the sport. So I think it's making sport less accessible for people in a time when wages are suppressed. You know, inflation is controllable. Wages are starting to grow again, but for the last decade or so, wages have been very squeezed in private and public sector. Where is this money coming from? Companies are going bust. People are getting laid off. Wages aren't growing. Where is this money coming from? That's another question. Where's the money coming from? Which football team do I support? I'm going to send you in the direction of a video I did last year of the teams I support in the various sports. It's somewhere in the depths of the channel about a year ago. I had long hair at the time and a beard. Yeah, last year I grew my beard and grew my hair. It got bad. I looked homeless. I think more like Jesus, but I looked homeless. What football team do I support? Okay, all jokes aside, I'm a Blackburn fan. I always have been. I have been since they were in the old Division 2 before the Premier League was started up, and you can blame my father for that. Although he's not here to, well, he's dead now, so you can't dig him up. Go, Dad, why did you turn me to the dark side? Oh wait, yeah, you were a Liverpool fan. I'm a Blackburn fan. Always have been. I'm concerned where football is going because of the ownership of my team, how the Venkies were allowed to buy the team, the mess they've made of it. But then I look at down the road at Bolton and the mess that's been made of that. I look up the road. I think Preston have had issues in their time. I look, at Leeds. So many big clubs regionally in British football have been badly run in the last 20 years. I remember when Leeds got relegated from the Premier League. The season after, they made a Champions League semi-final. So the decline of Leeds was quick. They were in a chance of winning the Champions League in 2002. By 2003, they're in the bottom 3 in the Premiership and getting relegated. And then their team was gutted in the transfer market, and they've never been back. That says all we need to know about Leeds ownership and the issues they've had in the last 15, 16 years is, they've been mismanaged to hell. And I remember the day they were relegated. I mean, the fact that Notts County are no longer in the Football League, they were the founders of the oldest club in the country, not in the Football League anymore. That says what's gone wrong in football. But I don't want it to be solely a football podcast today. I don't. There are so many other sports that I want to talk about, and whether you could say, but it's the NRL or it's Australian Rugby Union. They are big things happening because they're setting precedents for their sports and other sports worldwide to go forward. And you look at Israel Folau and that situation. That's been so divisive because some are saying it's an attack on religion to fire him. Well, actually, it's in his contract to behave on social media. It's pretty simple stuff. But the way Billy Verpola was dealt with by the RFU, and then you compare it around the world, there is an issue there. Okay, I'll ask this question quickly. What sporting events am I covering this summer? The cricket's going to be difficult because of the accessibility to it. The Stanley Cup final is the Stanley Cup final is going to kick, I think, start tonight or tomorrow. They're going to play game 1 of the Stanley Cup final. I'll be looking at that. The NRL I obviously cover and State of Origin. We've got the Women's World Cup football. I will be covering that because the hours that I work in the day, I'll be at home in the evening to watch all the games. I'm not going to be able. I actually will be able to watch every single women's game this year because of the hours I'm working for the job I've got. So that's a positive. So I'm covering that. There are obviously the football transfers, any sporting news, the Rugby Union World Cup. That's going to be harder to cover. I'm going to miss a lot of the games because of the hours I work, because it's in Japan, but I'm going to give it a shot to cover as much as I can with the Rugby Union World Cup. It's not perfect, but I'm going to give that a go. The Great Britain Rugby League tour down under, I will try and cover that as much as possible later in the year as well. And then I'm just going to cover the events that I can cover, really. I've covered the FA Cup. I did all but 5 games of the World Cup, the football, last summer. That was long. That was so long. I covered so many games and sweated so heavily in that summer. The Women's World Cup in France is going to be interesting. Because when I watched the Euros a couple of years ago, the tournament itself, the quality of football was yeah. The atmospheres were good, but the quality of football was a bit up and down. The pitch quality was the problem. The quality of the pitches was a massive, massive issue. And I think we're going to have the same issue with the women's game that we had in the men's game 3 years ago. The quality of the pitch. I looked at the quality of those pitches and they were cutting up. They weren't settling very well. When it did rain, they were just terrible quality compared to what we normally get. It is what it is. The NRL is actually on Sky Sports now. It used to be on Premier and Free Sports. They've moved it back to Sky Sports. But there is a website called Watch NRL, which is an NRL website that is for viewers outside of Australasia. It's 120 odd quid a year. It's not actually bad for a 12-month subscription. You can get a monthly subscription for like $12.99. I'm tempted to get that. There are some other websites which host games. Whether that's legal or not is another thing. But I found a couple of websites where you actually pay a small subscription, but you can watch. But it is also on Sky, which is a massive problem. The NRL, the Knights, yeah, I'm going to do my round review. I watched the game and the Roosters were hammered. There were a lot of injuries in the game, though. That was the big concern for both sides, was players getting injured again. The Roosters have been hammered with injuries, and the Knights picked up a few as well. Cooper Cronk was rested, which I think is the right thing to do. I think, he's announced his retirement. They've got a bye week next week. He does need a couple of weeks just to rest and recuperate. Considering that, his shoulder was shattered last year and he played the grand final and the semi-final with a broken shoulder. Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons why he's retired. I think he knows that if he injures that shoulder again, it's not just career over. He's in a serious, serious amount of trouble. And I think he's worked out his body can't take the wear and tear anymore. It's not that his mind isn't there, it's the body's breaking down, and I think he wants to end on a reasonably high note rather than end because of injury. I think that's I think where he's coming from with that one. Cooper Cronk, the fact that he was a rugby union player at youth level, and I've done a few videos on that, says a lot. And I'm going to look at Rugby Australia and the problems that Rugby Australia has faced and is facing, and losing players like Cooper Cronk in the last 20 years from youth level to senior level is part of the problem they're facing. They're not keeping players who are really skilled at youth level into the professional or semi-pro ranks where they can then develop them to represent the Wallabies. They're just not keeping them. They're bleeding them to NRL. They're bleeding them to the AFL. And there's an issue there. And I've covered a little bit in some of the Israel Folau videos, but we're going to look at Rugby Australia and the issues that they face. And I'm going to look at the amount of NRL players that actually played Rugby Union at youth level who've switched codes, and there are a lot. The Great Britain against Australia, that is an interesting one. I can get why some fans are a bit miffed, but Tonga and Fiji have deserved the right to play against Great Britain. The way Tonga and Fiji played in that World, especially Tonga in that World Cup, and it was only a 2 points difference in that World Cup semi-final. Absolutely, they deserve an international against Great Britain. The rugby authorities down under, they want to grow the Tongan and Fijian game. Samoa is just a mess in both codes. There is corruption there. There is bankruptcy there. But you look at Tonga and Fiji, a lot of the players for Tonga and Fiji who could also be eligible for Australia or New Zealand decided to represent Tonga and Fiji in the last World Cup. And they want to build upon that fan base in New Zealand. There's 300,000 South Sea Islanders living in Auckland, the Auckland area. They turned out in force when Tonga and Fiji were playing matches. They filled out stadiums that the Kiwis couldn't and the Aussies couldn't. But I'm a bit miffed that the Great Britain don't get a series against Australia, be it home or away. I think this is a starting point because it's been 12 years without a Great Britain Rugby League side. We're going to have to see what happens going forward. We're going to have to see the success of this tour, how they play, how many non-English players get in the side. That's another crucial one because we have to see how many Welsh and Scottish players and the occasional Irish player, how many of them actually make it into the Lions squad. It's basically an all but name, really. The amount of money the RFL has pumped into the English game, it's good, but also bad because they've reported massive losses the last couple of years. So there's a balancing act there. And we'll have to see how good the tour is. Do we win all 3 tests? Do we lose all 3 tests? Are they going to be close? Are they going to be tense? It's going to be fun to watch. And I think the Kiwis also want to have a Great Britain touring side because they haven't had one for a while as well. the Kiwis are in a transition phase right now. They were the world's best team a few years back. Now they're the second, third best team again. They're in a transition phase. They're going to want to pit themselves against top opposition. The Tongans and Fijians are putting their hand up and saying, hang on a second, we're also pretty good right now. I think, eventually we will see how it goes. Will Australia, Great Britain be a tour series, vice versa? Again, we'll have to wait and see what happens after this tour. Georgia, should they be in the Six Nations? I haven't covered Rugby Union for a little while. Until they can actually beat a Six Nations side, I'm including Italy and Scotland in there. They were close with Wales in an autumn international a couple of years ago, but Wales made so many changes, it was disrespecting the Georgians, I felt. Just put your strongest side out. Always put your strongest side out. And, if there are a few injuries or there's a player's not fully quite right, you put that young player in, you put that French player in. He's got to put his hand up and say, select me next time. That was a shambles. But until the Georgians can actually beat a Six Nations side, they shouldn't be in there because they'll just constantly yo-yo. They'll go up, they'll lose all 6 games, they'll go down, have to wait a year, play the teams below them, at which point, another team's got up. Italy are too good for that second tier competition. They'll trounce it every time. And the fact that Benetton Treviso did as well as they did in the Pro 14, there is not a single professional Georgian side that can do anything in Europe. And until the Georgian National League is good enough and they can get their players back from the French League, no. They need to develop the game in Georgia, where it is a national sport, by the way. It's overtaken football now. But the fact that their backline is so average, their backline is not great. Their forward pack is outstanding. They can scrum all day. They can hit up the ball all day, carry it up. But their backline is so limited. Yeah, they might be beating Romania at the moment. They might be beating Spain and Germany at the moment, and Portugal. But until they can beat that Tier 1 nation, don't put them in the Six Nations. It's always interesting, though, that the Six Nations promotion relegation gets brought up when Italy are at bottom. But when Italy are away from the bottom and it's France or Scotland or sometimes occasionally Wales, England getting in there, that relegation conversation disappears entirely. And Georgia are facing the same issues that Italy faced 25 years ago, 20 years ago. And Italy at the time were actually beating teams like Ireland, Wales, Scotland, France. Haven't been England yet, but they were beating the likes of high European nations. Georgia aren't quite doing that yet. So until Georgia can do what Italy did 25 years ago, they're not going to get in. And the club game in Italy is massively improved from what it was 10 years ago. I think the plans by World Rugby to rejig the Rugby International calendar haven't gone down well with the Tier 2 and Tier 3 nations. And the fact that nations are threatening to boycott the World Cup, one nation is not even sure that it can pay its players at the World Cup, that says a lot as well. So also, until there's revenue sharing from these test matches, where it's 50-50, rather than 20,000 euros or pounds for a Tier 1 nation, Six Nations player versus 500 quid for a Fijian team, again, nothing is going to change. And that debate is not going away. And World Rugby is not doing enough. They're trying to rejig the international format, but they're not actually addressing the issues of paying the players and addressing the issue of why Tier 2 nation players are being bled into Tier 1 nation teams. Those issues are long-standing. They've been going on since the turn to professionalism in 1995. They're not going away. So for the last 24 years, there's been a lot of issues that rugby has not dealt with and has allowed to keep going. And now Super Rugby is so bad. Super Rugby, you've got to look at Super Rugby and the empty stadiums they play in front of. At no point in a regular season Super Rugby game have I seen a full stadium where every row of every stand has people in it. It may not have to be a packed house, but I've never seen a stadium at 78% capacity. Never. And those crowds that aren't there. And then there is a problem. Super Rugby has been badly managed. Other sports in those countries are better promoted, better supported, more accessible. They get better TV coverage. Australia is a prime example of the mess that is Super Rugby. More people watch the AFL and NRL. There are more clubs to support. The second tier below the top tier levels, there's a good semi and lower professional ranks where your average player who's breaking into the game can get paid decent money as a teenager, early 20s. They can get $1,000 a week. And rugby league is trouncing rugby union. If you want to compare codes that are comparable, rugby league is battering union in Australia. There's a reason why players are switching codes or buggering off to Europe and North America. They get paid. They get paid as the overseas player. In Australia, young Australians who play the game at high school or in the youth setup, they are seeing, let's say, a schoolmate who might be playing rugby league, and he's 18, 19, or a friend. He's getting paid $500 a game, semi-pro. The other guy's amateur. He's getting paid sod all, or having to pay to play. He's getting battered 60-0. His mate's probably in a game where it's very close, competitive. What's he going to choose? $500 to $1,000 a weekend, or possibly getting paid and having to mend training round work. Whereas the other guy's semi-pro already. He might be doing a job like a carpenter or a painter, a car salesman, wherever it is, and he's learning a trade, but also he's getting paid to play decent money. He's going to go for the rugby league. You think about it. And there's a reason why Australia are the best rugby league side in the world right now. The youth system works. The system works. It's not just the NRL. There is a whole level below at state level. You've got New South Wales Cup, Queensland Cup, ITS. You've got, even in Western Australia, where there isn't a top flight professional side at the moment, the second tier level, there's some decent rugby league to be had around Perth and Fremantle. There are teams. AFL's the main code there, but there are teams. And there are Western Australian born players playing in the NRL. This is the thing. It's not happening in rugby union. And that debate about player development and at the lower grassroots level. I mean, I used to play for my local rugby club, and yeah, there is an issue with facilities. There's an issue with funds. Crowds aren't great. Some teams in that league get battered 60-0 every weekend. But that one or two games they actually win, they get a bonus point in there. So they stay up and get battered next season and the season after and the season after. And a lot of these rugby union clubs have to rely on the off season to make a lot of revenue where they have. But when I was at a bike motorcycle meet about a couple of weeks ago on one of the previous bank holidays, where 1,000 people turned up for a motorcycle meet and spent money in the rugby club. A local rugby club not too far from me opened its gates for a motorcycle meet. They do it 3-4 times a summer. That's how they make their money. Other ones have small little music festivals or other open air festivals to make their money. They allow camping. They allow quad bike. They open up their properties to make money in the summer when it's the off season, because they cannot afford to run otherwise. They'll be out of business. That's the issue with rugby union at the lower level. Now you have things like the Israel Folau issue, which, especially for Australian rugby, is killing it. It's killing it. Because not only are the TV broadcasters, be it free-to-air and pay-per-view subscription, trying to streamline what they show and invest their money in rugby league, AFL, cricket, the overseas sport that they do show now, they're showing more and more overseas leagues and sport on Australian TV. Because every time I manage to catch an NRL broadcast, they're mentioning the Super League on the channel that they show. They have dedicated channels just for one sport. So Rugby League has its own channel. AFL has its own channel, because the way the games are scheduled over the weekend, you can get every single game on without them clashing. There's no two games that kick off at the same time. They staggered them. So you can get every single game in a day. And they have a longer playing weekend from Thursday through to Sunday. They've dropped Monday Night Football unless it's a bank holiday. So there's only a couple of Monday games now. It's more accessible for the fans to get to. They don't have that Monday night game, which everyone hates. Everyone hates. They realised, Monday Night Football sucks. Because they call it football in Australia. They don't call it rugby. They call it footy. They realised Monday night games were not getting great crowds and weren't getting the best TV audiences anymore. They used to, they're not anymore. And they realised people were preferring all their rugby union and rugby league, and AFL between Thursday and Sunday because of a 4 to 5 day working week. It's a no-brainer. People can actually get to the games. The stadiums are pretty full, and the TV audience is also bigger. So Monday night games were dropped. They tried it, they experimented, it was good initially, and they realised the viewership figures were dropping. The crowd numbers were dropping. And we'll drop that off the TV. I mean, and the broadcasters in Australia, I know this is an example because I have some subscribers and I do watch a lot of Australian sport. They are saying, yeah, they're trying to streamline over here the sports that they show big time, and then the lesser sports they want to put on lesser channels on the Skybox or the Fox box. Afghanistan, yeah, it's a national sport in Afghanistan. They're now a test side like Ireland, so they should no test side should be underestimated. If you're a test playing side, you should not be underestimated. And the fact that Ireland have done things at the World Cup in the past, and they're playing test matches, and Afghanistan are playing test matches, they've earned the right to be where they are. They've earned the right. I think the weakest test side is Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe, because of what's happening domestically in Zimbabwe politically and socially, yeah, they've dropped off a cliff. I remember watching Zimbabwe-England in Jimmy Anderson's first test match at Lord's in 2003, 16 years ago, almost to the day, where what's happened in the last 16 years with Zimbabwean sport. The white athletes, it's not safe for them to live and train in Zimbabwe anymore, and there's no money. It's corrupt as hell, and if you're a white player, you can get shot. It's not safe for you to live in Zimbabwe. There's a big issues in Zimbabwe. We're not going to talk about Zimbabwe, but Afghanistan, yeah, they've come a long way. And beating Pakistan is a big thing. Big thing. Pakistan regionally dominates Afghanistan politically. So for them to win a sporting contest, massive. Absolutely massive. We'll have to see what happens at the World Cup. We'll have to see what teams beat what teams and who beats who and what the shocks are, because they've jigged the format a little bit, and not all cricket fans are happy with the changed format. That's interesting to look at. But yeah, Afghanistan, they can win some games. They can definitely win some games. They can definitely be dark horses to go a decent growth. It's all about growing the game. It's all about that impact you have when you can grow a sport in countries that have had such negative press about them. If you can give such a positive thing socially, it affects how people think, and they want to take pride in what they do, and it actually helps communities. It does. And there's some economic impacts when they go, oh yeah, we want to sell as much Afghanistan memorabilia as possible. We want to make cricket bats. We want to make sure the pitches are good. We want to fix up things, and then it gives you some pride, and then your community wants to say, look, we can do stuff. This is the best that our community, these are our national heroes. And it does lead to investment from outside investors coming in. That means local areas get investment, jobs are created, and then it's a positive. There are some negatives, but there's some positives. The Zimbabwe thing, I went to school with a Zimbabwean, and his family no longer live in Zimbabwe. Let's just say that. Yeah, I actually know quite a few people from Zimbabwe. I know a lot of people from South Africa and Namibia anyway. There's a big community over here in the UK. In the area of the UK I live in, one of my mates, South African, Cape Town, wife from Joburg. A friend of mine who passed away, Joburg. The girl I'm dating, Pretoria. I'll say dating, I'm sort of talking to Pretoria. So there's a big South African community here in the UK, also around the world. You've got a big South African community, or Southern African, you've got Canada, New Zealand, Australia. There's a lot of Zimbabweans in the UK as well. I've got my friend Rob, he's mixed race, so half white, half black. He's from Zimbabwe. He's a train driver. He's a train driver for the local railway company here in the UK. I've got friends from all over Africa living in there's a big African white, black, and mixed race community all around the Commonwealth that have left Southern Africa and gone to Australia, South Africa to Australia, New Zealand, and Canada, especially, and the UK. There's a big community stretching from Vancouver to Auckland. And everywhere in between. Massive communities. And yeah, they are actively involved in the sport side of things. A lot of them are involved in cricket, rugby. One or two actually play ice hockey. Yeah, there's one or two South African-born players playing British ice hockey right now. Not at the top level, but there are one or two floating around who've playing on ice. Something they don't get in Africa. So these expats, these who've spread around the world. Yeah, they are actively involved in the sports side of communities, and a lot of them play sport professionally, and they have had a big impact on the clubs they play for, the teams they play for. Yeah, and they are mad when it comes to the football side of things. Absolutely mad. Oh, wait, we've just got a random video notification that I'm not interested in. But yeah, no, they do. They are actually. It's not just football. It's every sport. Every South African I know is mad about cricket and rugby. The Zimbabweans I know, yeah, mad about football, mad about it, and a lot of them have played amateur to semi-pro level. A lot of the my South African and Zimbabwean friends have at some point played decent level sport. It's something to do with the national psyche. I look at Great Britain, and I look at the Canadians, and I look at the Australians, and I look at Kiwis, and I look at how they treat the national sports or team sports. It doesn't matter what level you play at; it's seen more positively than over here. There seems to be a higher regard which they hold, sportsmen. And you look at the amount of participation in sport; it's a lot higher in these countries than in the UK. I look at ice hockey in Canada. I think 75% of Canadians at some point have played ice hockey at some level, be it youth level, junior, semi-pro, pro. 75% of Canadians have picked up a hockey stick and a puck and have played the game. Organised. It's not just playing in the street roller hockey, street hockey with a little goal and some rollerblades and a street puck or a street ball. We're talking organised team sport where they have played. 75% have played ice hockey. That's not including Canadian football, what they would call soccer, what we call football, rugby union, rugby league, or cricket, or basketball and baseball. We're talking one sport. 75% of the population have played at some point in their lives. That is striking when they're playing organised team sport. Australia, I think it's AFL, cricket, and rugby league. So Aussie rules, rugby league, and cricket. Again, the percentage of Australians who play those sports at some organised level, be it school level, so youth or school level, so in school or outside of school, amateur, semi-pro, pro, is again around 70-odd%. And then you've got the other sports like cycling, swimming, and tennis, and a whole variety of individualistic and team sports. And you look at it and they go, okay, New Zealand, Rugby League and Rugby Union and cricket are the three top ones. Football, or as they would call it, soccer, is sort of fourth place. And then you've got ice hockey in there as well. Again, it's in the high percentages of organised. We're talking organised week in, week out, at the weekends, semi-pro and amateur level, very, very high. And then you look... and then you look at over here, we're talking 20%, 30%. A lot of people aren't involved in playing at some point organised team sport. Now, I'm one of those percentages who have, and it's very striking. Right, now we've got to look at some of the questions after I've had notifications come up which block the chat. There is a big Sudanese community, and actually East African in general in Melbourne. It's not just Sudan. It's Djibouti, Eritrea, Ethiopia. I watched a documentary on Four Corners. Yes, I watched Four Corners, which highlighted some of the issues that not just the Sudanese but the East African community are facing in Melbourne. There's a big crime issue and a panic issue and all this kind of stuff, and the media are really playing on the fact that they're the colour of their skin and where they're from. They really are playing on that. That's the Murdoch media, and I really hate the Murdoch media. I love Four Corners. It's brilliant. Love it. It's basically the Australian version of Panorama. We have a similar program called Panorama over here on the BBC because ABC is a sister corporation of the BBC. And yeah, we have Panorama, but I prefer Four Corners. It's just there's something about the way they go about the programming. Out of the Great Britain ice hockey squad, two currently. So you've got Liam Kirk and who's the other one? I think it is Ben Davis who play outside of the UK. You've got Ben Kirk in Canada, and I think Davis plays in Germany. So at the moment, and Ben O'Connor's played in Sweden and was for a brief period contracted to KHL side. So at the moment, there's only two who do play out of the UK, but there are British players playing at universities in North America and Canada, or US and Canada, and it seems, I think, some of the players will get picked up. It's going to be interesting to see, because the squad's been together so long, some of the players are now later on in their careers, but some of the younger players, like Kirk will make it in North American ice hockey. He'll play at the ECHL, AHL level. He will make it up the level ranks. He might even play some games in the NHL as an emergency call-up. I think he will make some games at the NHL level. I'm not 100% certain how many, but the rate that we're going with the growth of the game and the fact that Leeds are getting a team this year. Yeah, the Leeds Chiefs. I don't know why they call it the Chiefs though. There could have been other names they chose, but they chose the Chiefs. I think more of them will be scouted by overseas teams, and they might be classed as the overseas player rule, and they might go to Europe. I can see more British players playing overseas eventually. There's going to be more British players drafted by the NHL at some point. They've got that exposure now, and they've got that second year of exposure to come. And the North American leagues will take notice of these European players. They will. There's some free agents who've been signed to the North American leagues professionally, ECHL, AHL, NHL. So there's some free agents who've been signed because of what they're doing at the World Championships now. Yeah, there will be British players going as free agents at some point, undrafted to the North American leagues. Whether they end up getting to the NHL level is another thing, but there are things in progress happening in British ice hockey because you're looking at the restructured National League, which is the tier below the Elite League, and I do think some of those teams in the National League, like Bracknell and Peterborough, Hull will make that step to the Elite League as time goes on, because the Elite League has said it wants to grow. It wants to fill that gap left by Edinburgh. Obviously, what happened with Milton Keynes Lightning, that's a bummer, but they do want to actually grow and get the league bigger. And I think there are at least 3 or 4 teams that have the arena size or the quality level and the history to take that next step. It's the funding side of things that is the issue for a lot of these teams. And I think Hull's the most likely. And then after that, Bracknell and Peterborough may take that next step. And with this Leeds team coming in, that's going to be really, really interesting to see how well they do this season, what players they can get in that squad. And I'm going to have to look at their little squad. How they play. I'll be able to watch them a couple of times this season when they play away against Bracknell. So I'll be able to see how the Leeds Chiefs do. It's a big step for the City of Leeds. The interesting thing, the concern I have is because they've got Sheffield and Hull and Nottingham and other places around that have had teams for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years, 70 years, 80 years even, how they're going to attract fans. How they're going to get fans to go into Leeds, to watch a game, to buy into the sport, to be interested. I know there are fans there because the NHL, and the GB national side and things like that, there are fans in the UK. It's just how many fans actually live in Leeds, considering you've got the Rhinos in Rugby League, Carnegie in Rugby Union, and you've got Leeds United in the football. And you've got the cricket as well, Yorkshire. How many fans are going to want to go, okay, ice hockey. So we're watching Rugby Union. I'm a Carnegie fan. I'm going to actually spend my money watching the Chiefs rather than the Carnegie. I'm going to spend my money watching the Chiefs rather than Leeds United. That's what they've got to actually attract, is that sport fan. Now, they are lucky. They're a university city. So, they can get that university kind of educated bit of money. There is the British University League. I think, they can get that educated fan to come across. It's the working class fan that I think they want to get. And they're a new side. They've never had, as far as I'm aware, Leeds have never had a semi-pro professional hockey team. It's going to be interesting to see how they attract fans. Players shouldn't be a problem because that part of the world, that part of the country, a lot of people have played. There is a hockey community. It's just, can they get people to get in that rink and start watching games and build the fan base? That's the interesting one. They've got to, interact with the community, get the local community on board, advertise themselves in the local papers, local radio, billboards, adverts, whatever it is, and get people interested to come down, because the Guildford Flames, Bracknell Bees, Bison, Slough Jets, they're all scattered around. Every team that I've seen has built something with the community. So when there are struggles for the team, the community comes out, the fan base comes out, and has helped these teams stay going. I look at, Hull, when the Hull Stingrays went out of business, the Hull Pirates came along, and initially the away games there were very few fans, and then as the seasons went on, more and more fans came back to the thing, and they did pretty well. So it's going to be interesting to see how Leeds do. But I think, the name is a scratchy head one, why they went for the Chiefs, but they decided to go down that route. Basketball, yes, basketball is very, very big in Australia at amateur, semi-pro level. It's starting to grow over here as well in UK sport, but at the same time, it's such a minor sport compared to other organised team sports that it is struggling to get that coverage, to get that exposure, and to get players to play. Generally, if you're pretty tall and you're sporty, you go into rowing, swimming, and maybe rugby union as a lock or number 8. A lot of people decide to go into other sports because there's money there. If they want to go professionally, they go into the other sports if they're big and tall and powerful. They don't go into basketball, although it is growing in the urban areas. In the big cities, basketball has a following. Outside of the big urban areas, they're more rugby union, rugby league, football, cricket, amateur, semi-pro, and then pro level. There isn't the drive to have it in the small regional towns and the smaller cities. It's the big cities like Birmingham and London that really drive basketball in the UK. Basketball is actually very, very popular across Europe, though. As a Europe-wide, if you look at the stats, it is very popular, partly to do with the US military bases after World War II. The same with baseball. To a point, it's then, we'll watch it, we'll play amateur, but the professional organised leagues necessarily aren't there. But basketball, I think, is the biggest, after ice hockey, North American popular sport, though ice hockey actually was invented in Europe. But basketball, as the North American style sports, is more popular than most across Europe. And I think it's more of a post-World War II thing, and the countries that picked it up were either the communist bloc or those countries that had large US presence and military bases. And there's a reason why the ex-communist countries are pretty good at basketball, because of the rivalry between the USSR and the US when it came to came to Olympic sport. Hearts losing to Celtic. Celtic have won the treble. The odds against that. I think Scottish football does need, though, a break with this Celtic wing and everything. I mean, if Kilmarnock can carry on what they did this season, and Gerrard with Rangers and Hearts, if they can get another good start to the season and go on a long run, but maintain it, and Aberdeen have slipped back. I mean, it was so competitive in the SPL this year until the last 2-3 months, and all the teams dropped off. I think having Steve Clarke as the national manager might actually put some impetus into some of the smaller clubs developing players. Handball's an interesting one because I've watched it at the Olympics, and I think the answer is no. I don't think there's for some reason we put so much energy into football, especially a mad amount of money, effort into football. Highest paid league in the world. Too much. I think there's too much emphasis on football, and to a certain extent, rugby union, then rugby league, then cricket, the 4 big sports. The success story of that is GB ice hockey is growing and is starting to eat fans away from these 4 big sports. Handball, where are the facilities? And then you've got to look at facilities and then interest. I've watched a lot of the Olympic sports, and there's a reason why we don't win medals in these sports. There's a reason why smaller European nations are really good at them. They take it. Look at you, as I say. Look at the percentage of people who play sport, organised sport post school. Okay, so that's outside at youth level. So local youth clubs or local football rugby clubs that have a youth system. Amateur level at adult, semi-pro level, and then pro level. Look at the percentage of people post-schooling who play some organised team sport, and you'll be surprised. Now, I've played 5-a-side, 6-a-side, and 7-a-side football. I've done that. I've played rugby union at my local rugby club. I've done that, and I've done organised kickboxing as well. I've done that. So I'm one of those stats that make up a percentage of people who've done an organised team or individualistic sport outside of education. But then you look at these other countries with the percentage of people who still do amateur or semi-pro senior sport in their country. It's higher. It is higher. And there's more state funding percentage to these sporting programs. Even if it's a little bit of money, there's still state involvement where the athletes are necessarily, if they are getting funding, tax exempt, or their sponsorships tax exempt. And they're given more assistance where if they do want to go to a training camp abroad where there is, let's say, better facilities, the government will encourage them to do so, to then come back and then improve the sport when they start winning medals because whatever reason. And then the national broadcasters will broadcast the tournaments. So handball was one of them where the Balkan states, the former Yugoslavia, is quite good. Some really random countries that you wouldn't think would be good at sport are actually very, very good at it. And you look at the former communist states, they are amazing at organised team sports when it comes to Olympic level. Because of the rivalry between the US and the Soviet Union back in the Cold War, the Allied states that were allied to the Soviet Union also had these massive state programs that still have a legacy today, where it's institutionalized in the wider community that we have to do well at sport for the pride of our country. Handball, Montenegro, that's their biggest sport, is handball. They are brilliant at it. They've only been an independent country for 13 years, but they are brilliant at handball. They've taken to it like a water off a duck's back. They really put a lot of effort into it. Now, it's a small population, but the population size of Montenegro, the percentage of people who play in organised team competition at amateur, semi-pro and pro level is very, very high. The Lance Armstrong thing. Now, that is taken out of context because he was also asked the question a couple of years ago if he was to start professional cycling today or was to make it to the professional ranks, would he dope? And he said no. He said no. And I think not only... So you want to put it into the context of the other interviews that Armstrong has done since he was outed, since he came clean. Ironically, he's the one who actually said, yeah, I'm putting my hand up and I did some naughty things. He was asked the question, I think about 2 years ago. I forget. I think he was actually on the Tour de France podcast. I think 2 years ago, he does a podcast on the Tour de France. He also does some commentary for Eurosport. He was actually asked in an interview because he's that much of a periphery, he's that much of a divisive figure, much like Israel Folau is from Rugby Union now with his scandal, and Diego Maradona was in football with his drug scandal and all the stuff. He's that kind of figure where he's such a pinnacle at the top of the sport that when there is a scandal involving that individual, questions will be asked. And he was asked the question a couple of years ago if he was to, go from the amateur ranks to the professional ranks now, would he dope? And he said no. I've seen documentaries about him. I've watched the film. The film is a bit naff, so to speak, but I've watched so much, I've read so much about it. But he doesn't regret doing what he did at the time. Well, he's being honest. I think you have to look at it in the context. At the time, 90% of the peloton at some point had cheated, be it once or regularly. Now, a lot less professional cyclists are cheating, but the institutionalized damage and the image damage is done. So now we look at Chris Froome with suspicion, and we look at Contador, who's been caught cheating several times. How Contador is still allowed to compete is unreal because he's been banned twice. And the fact that the sport welcomes back ex-cheats with open arms without asking too many questions, unless it's a big-name rider. If it's a big-name rider, they're like, oh, yeah. But if it's another rider, they're like, come back in. So it's okay. You got caught this time. It's fine. The attitudes within the sport have to change. But Lance Armstrong, he's one of those guys who just speaks. I don't know who's advising him to say these things, but he lost all his money. He's making all his money back again by doing all these interviews and releasing his book and, talking into that film he had. He's making all his money back. Ironically, all the money he lost, he's making back. He's still in the media. He still does stuff. I think what Lance Armstrong has to be involved in the anti-doping message because he lost everything. He lost absolutely everything. He has to be involved in the anti-doping message and the organised cheating that was there, because it's not just doping, there's other forms of machinations with team cycling that are behind the scenes as well. And I can remember the Festina protest in '98. So the year before Lance Armstrong wins his first Tour de France, the Festina team, the Festina scandal, which really was the catalyst for what that was the big scandal then until Lance Armstrong admitted what he'd done, was the Festina scandal, and the damage that did to the sport is people don't remember it. 21 years ago, a whole cycling team were thrown out and then disbanded within a few days. Marco Palantini, his suspicious death with the mafia allegedly involved. Lance Armstrong is just a big name in the sport. But many of his contemporaries are exactly the same. Many of it. Eddie Merckx is regularly criticised, and people are like, well, he cheated. He did. He's just never come admitted it. It is one of them. We can talk about the Lance Armstrong to death. He's that divisive. But what I will say is this: you have to put that in the context of the whole story, from coming clean to then being asked if he was to be involved in cycling today, would he dope if he was given a professional contract? And he did say no. So there is a culture shift. I think he was part of the toxic culture at the time. If he was to be a cyclist today, he has said no. But the in between being honest about what he did and now, he's been banned from sport for life. He wants to be a triathlete. He's been stripped of his titles, or between that period, he was winning stuff. He's had some damage done to him, but he's making money still. He's just a divisive figure. But you have to put it into context of the whole story, and there's a lot more to come out. It's not just Lance Armstrong. Jan Ullrich cheating. Contador, he's been caught twice. Floyd Landis. Every Tour de France winner at some point there's been question marks about his integrity. And we're still getting riders getting caught doping now. So the sport has got an image issue, and I don't know how you clean it up, or do you say sod it, just everyone cheat, or then it's not cheating if everyone's doing it. But the sport does have an image problem massively, and we'll have to see what happens in the future with the way they deal with it and how they clean up the act. But it's got massive problems. If Tranmere are to win that game, that's back-to-back promotions, and they were only in the Football League for a season, so that's going to be interesting because there's something going on at Tranmere which, this time a year ago they were trying to. I think they won the playoffs to get back to the Football League, or did they get promoted straight from the conference? This time a year ago, they got promoted back to the Football League. So there's something going on at Tranmere, which is a real story. And they are the other club from Merseyside that people forget about. If Tranmere are to get back to League One, that's a big thing. I think for too long, Tranmere has been ignored as a club, as a fan base. It's a big fan base. It's a big fan. Birkenhead is Tranmere, basically. It's that side of the Wirral. It's big. It's big news. Is Tranmere Rovers. That's a well supported club, and I think, if they pull that off and get back to the League One where they were before the the issues happened where they got relegated twice. Yeah, no, that's big. That's a big story. You got to think of it in the context. So when it comes to Merseyside, in Rugby League, it's St Helens, and rugby football, it's Liverpool and Everton, and they get overlooked as an area where there is a professional team with a sizable fan base, and that team and that fan base is regularly overlooked by the local and national media, and it's just like it's just Tranmere, it's Tranmere Rovers, hey. But there is definitely a community around that club. When I did the video last year when they got promoted back to the Football League, a lot of people watched that video. There was a lot of comments left on that video, a lot of shares, a lot of likes. So there is that fan base there. And whatever you may think of football, when a club that gets regularly overlooked does something decent and something good, there are fans there, and they are a bit annoyed with the constant obsession with Everton and Liverpool. Absolutely. It's the small clubs that make the game. It's not the big clubs. The small clubs, the grassroots clubs that provide the players that the big clubs nick eventually. Anyway, that's my personal view on it. But no, that's going to be interesting to see if Tranmere do it. That's back-to-back promotions. That's hard to do. And to come from the non-league back to Football League and then to get promoted again, that's really hard. You have to. That's something going on that's special. Newport as well, considering where they were a couple of years ago, struggling at the Football League. Their FA Cup runs have become legendary the last couple of seasons, and that'd be a story as well for Newport, considering how they were struggling a couple of years ago. And to be fair, for Welsh football, because Cardiff and Swansea have had tasted Premier League. Taste the Premier League. Swansea have won the League Cup. Cardiff been to an FA Cup final in the last decade or so. So for Newport to get up the league ladder as well would be a massive boost for Welsh football. It's just a pity what's happened to Wrexham. But again, there are some positive stories that got overlooked by the fact that certain clubs get all the attention. And there are big fan bases for all these clubs, at lower levels. There's some big fan bases out there, and they get overlooked. And I think this is the problem with football in this country: is the obsession with the big four, the big six, kind of the top clubs. The over obsession with just like, oh, Mourinho said something, okay. The obsession with the two Manchester clubs is head scratching. It is, and part of the reason for that is the media in this country is London and Manchester based. If Media City wasn't in Salford but was in Birmingham, I wouldn't be surprised if it was a different kind of kettle of fish. If West Brom had stayed up, Wolves would get more coverage if the Media City had been put in the West Midlands. I have no doubt on that. They went for Manchester, and the obsession with Man United and Man City when it comes to the BBC have your say, when it comes to transfer news or a manager under pressure or a game, it gets dull. It gets boring. It's like the Toronto Maple Leafs in the NHL. There is when I try and find NHL news and I look at what trade rumors are there, what injury reports, and I go on TSN or I go on Sportsnet. Now I know they're Canadian websites, but that's the best place to find NHL coverage in North America is TSN. It's Maple Leaf, Canadians, Senators, Maple Leaf. Oh, Canucks, Jets, Flames, Maple Leaf. 70% of the articles are on the Toronto Maple Leafs. And yeah, fans in North America and Canada especially get bored of it. But the Canadian media is based out of Toronto. Much like the BBC is based out of London and Manchester, it's something we have to deal with as sports fans is the unintentional media bias on certain teams. So Arsenal, Chelsea, Tottenham, they get a lot of coverage. They do. Man United, Man City get a lot of coverage. Liverpool, because they're in Liverpool, which is just down the road from Manchester, a lot of coverage. And then you have the rest of the country. And if you're talking about football, they don't get the coverage they deserve, unless it's a London club that has an issue or a club in the Northwest. Yeah, no, you have to dig a little bit. You have to find the article on so-and-so manager getting sacked or this transfer involving insert club here or that. It's a little bit frustrating. And the obsession with certain clubs is nauseating. It is absolutely nauseating. But at the same time, it's the unintended consequence of where the media is based. The national media is not local media, national media. When it comes to the NHL, and you're looking for a Canadian team, it's all Toronto Maple Leafs, with some Montreal Canadiens in there because that's the French Canadian market, and then you have to dig for other stuff. Senators would be the third team on the list because it's the Senators on an average day. If you're talking about star players, that's different. But on an average day, it's Toronto Maple Leafs, Canadiens and Senators, and then you have to find what you're looking for. And it's because the media in Canada is based out of Toronto, the biggest city. And yeah, it is nauseating, but at the same time, it's understandable because of where the media is based. They're going to have easier access to interview the Maple Leafs organisation or those linked with the Maple Leafs than any of the other teams because it's on their doorstep. It's the same with the US media, New York and LA based. So you're looking at the US national media, national, not local, regional, national. It's New York or LA. And to a certain extent, Chicago. And then, yeah, you have to sort of, again, dig. So if you want to find out information about an NFL team, Major League Soccer, baseball, NHL, Major League Rugby, there's a team in New York now. And there's a team in Toronto. So again, heavily influenced where the media is based. And yeah, fans get, there's a media, but I look at the media bias, and it is frustrating. But at the same time, would I expect anything different if? No, it happens in every country. It so happens that the top 6 teams are in 3 cities that are heavily covered by the national media in this country. It happens. But I look at teams like Tranmere and Newport, and do they deserve a bit more coverage? Probably. But they're playing for the League One playoff. So they're trying to get into League One. How many fans are there of League One in this country? A few, but does the Premier League have a bigger reach? Absolutely. Does the Champions League, Europa League have a bigger reach? Hell yeah. Are these clubs going to be playing games in Europe next season? No. They're going to be playing in League One or League Two next season. But yeah, I get why, especially with the response that I had to the Tranmere video I did last year when they got promoted, why they get annoyed with Everton and Liverpool and other teams around them getting a lot of coverage. Is they are a smaller club in league position, not necessarily fan base. Right. So Celtic have won the treble. That was sort of expected. Unfortunate, but expected. But now, who's going to be the manager next season? That's the Celtic story. That's the Scottish media, Glasgow. So it's always Celtic Rangers, regardless of how the team is doing. And that's the Scottish national media. With Celtic now, it's not Neil Lennon's done a job. He's done that. It's who's going to be the manager next season. Because as far as I'm aware, Neil Lennon hasn't had any discussions with Celtic concerning extending his contract. So that's going to be interesting. The cricket questions come up again. Will I start watching the World Cup? Well, I live in the UK, so the coverage is going to be interesting. There is coverage on the radio. There's a highlights package. There's going to be some cricket available on free-to-air TV this summer. The thing is, the sport has a weird relationship at the moment with the media and the fans. There's a lot of issues with cricket in the UK. The highlights package, I think, is where I'm going to be really getting the coverage I need. But yeah, no, we've had some pretty decent weather the last week or so. I mean, I've come out with a bit of a tan. If the summer is like last summer, we could have some really good cricketing conditions to a point. But last summer got so hot and so humid, and the thunderstorms when they came were torrential. So the weather's going to have a big part to play with the cricket. But the issue with the cricket is this: it's got to compete against other sports. And Tranmere are getting promoted to League One, it seems. So I'm going to have to do a video on that after this. I'm going to do a video on Celtic winning the treble, and Tranmere getting promoted to League One. That's going to be interesting. Yes, the Frank Kirby. Interesting one. And I'll get onto that in a bit because we're not the first country to give equal pay to athletes. So Norway's ahead of us. I'll get onto that a bit. Cricket, I'm going to have to look into what access I can get to the media coverage because of my job, because this is not my full-time thing. My job is interesting because I work early in the mornings till around lunchtime to early afternoon. Okay. So I'm a bin man. So I go out and do the recycling rounds. So that's my job. That's what I do. That's what I do day in, day out. Which gives me time to watch the Women's World Cup, which is something that's coming up as well that the Cricket World Cup has to compete against. And the Women's World Cup is on free-to-air TV. So the TV audience is going to be interesting. I haven't seen a lot of advertising for the Cricket World Cup. I really haven't. I have not seen a lot of adverts saying, get your tickets, watch it here. So are they doing enough to promote it as well? I think it's going to be interesting. I think Afghanistan beating Pakistan is a really interesting warm-up game. How seriously will Pakistan taking it? I don't know. But Owen Morgan breaking his thumb, that's going to be interesting. He's an injury concern going into the tournament. Jofra Archer, he's been a big talking point when it comes to cricket fans. But cricket as a sport in this country is going through a really difficult phase right now where the fan base, the pay-per-view TV kind of thing, the accessibility, there's issues going on with cricket in this country right now. This could be a positive or negative. This could make or break cricket in this country of where its direction goes. Frank Kirby. Well, Norway actually made it law that women and men should be paid equally. The women's national side are paid equally to the men's when it comes to comes to payments. the conversation's going to be there. So it doesn't matter who wins the Women's World Cup, if it's the English or a European nation or Brazil or the US. The US are very good at women's football, by the way. The US did have a professional women's league. It went bust. It's got another professional women's league. It's struggling, and I've watched a lot of documentaries about that, and discussion TV panel programs about that. We have the Women's Super League, which has grown really, really well. We do have a professional league in this country. I think the Germans have gone the same way. The uptake has been there. There are more women playing the game, but the quality level on the pitch. Okay. The crowds. Can the sport support equal pay? And it's an interesting one. I don't think she's mental, but I do think she does have a point. They are professional, but the quality level. It is down to the quality level. The women's rugby union team are on centralised contracts. Their contracts are worth 30 to 50 grand a year before sponsorship. They need to get paid a decent wage, absolutely, but they're not going to get paid anything like the men's game. The men's game, they're overpaid, if I can make a point. The men's game, they are massively, massively overpaid. The women's game, it's in its infancy at professional level. There is a long way to go before we can, get them even close to a League 2 or League 1 standard of paycheck. And you have to look at League 1 and League 2. There are financial issues in those leagues. The amount of clubs that are in financial trouble and the league's losing money, there's an issue there. So I don't think she's mental. I think that's a bit harsh way, but the equal pay talks, that's been an ongoing issue for a while. But in Norway, the Norwegian Federation, the Norwegian FA, for international appearances at least, women have to be paid the same amount as men. And I think also at club level as well. So Norway have started this discussion by bringing that in at when it comes to international football. On the women's side of things, I don't know. I honestly don't know. I really don't know what, their pay will go up. The quality level will eventually improve as more people take up the game, more women take up the game. More clubs decide to turn professional and the game grows. Absolutely. There's going to be more interest. There's going to be more money available when it comes to TV rights and sponsorship. A lot of fans are frustrated that women's football is getting this shoved down their throat. If people like it, they will watch it. If the product is good, people will tune in. If the product is seen as, oh, that's really good, they will tune in. If the product skill level and quality level is crap, people won't watch. Just putting it out there. If they don't like it, they won't watch it. If it's not properly advertised, they won't watch it. I do feel they are overdoing it a little bit, and yeah, they are shoving it down our throats a little bit. I do think the World Cup, if England's women do win it, it will have a positive impact. But yeah, I wouldn't say no one cares. I would say the TV audience just isn't there to have it on. Put it on Free Sport. Free Sport has picked up minor sports and has grown the audience. And the Elite League Ice Hockey has had some good viewership figures this year. The World Championships for GB, really good viewership figures. But guess what? It's men's sport. If you're going to have women's football, put it on Free Sports, put it on Quest, where you can meet your TV audience kind of expectations. When it comes to international, absolutely have it on the TV. Absolutely just whack it in there. Channel 4, Channel 5. It's a pity they got rid of BBC 3 because I think that was the perfect place for women's football. BBC 3. Make BBC 3 a full 24-hour channel. Whack it on there. Make BBC 3 or even BBC 4 as the BBC Sport channel. Whack it. I do understand the scepticism of many. There were a lot of free tickets given away for this year's Cup final. And I think that was a big blunder. And even then, a lot of them were returned. They didn't advertise it very well. They haven't advertised either the Cricket World Cup or the Women's Football World Cup very, very well. Although I've seen more adverts for the Women's World Cup than the Cricket World Cup. So that's talking about if England win the World Cup, will it change anything? They've got to advertise it a hell of a lot better. They've really got to put it out there. If it's starting this week, where are the adverts? I've only seen 2 adverts for the Cricket World Cup. And one of them was on the side of a bus in Reading, when I was at a job interview about 3 months ago. And I've seen one advert saying this company sponsors the Cricket World Cup on telly. I've seen more adverts for the Women's World Cup where this is an official sponsor. This is an official sponsor. Head and Shoulders, they've got a lot of women's players with the Head and Shoulders adverts. So I've seen a lot more adverts and promotion when it comes to the Women's World Cup than the Cricket World Cup. And that says something as well. I wouldn't say no one cares about it, because I watched the Rugby World Cup Women's a couple of years ago. That was in Ireland, and there were some good crowds there. There were some really good crowds for the women's rugby. I will say that. The crowds in Ireland for the Rugby World Cup Women's 2 years ago were really good. I'm not knocking them for that. And they're all amateurs apart from the Englands and Kiwis. So England and the Kiwis, the All Blacks, they're the only professional sides. I wouldn't say the families, the stadiums are full of just their families, but at the same time, you've got to get the schools involved and you've got to get community groups involved and say, look, you can buy into this. But the issue is the quality level isn't great. Unless you're watching the US women's side and to a certain extent some of the South American teams like Brazil, the quality level is a bit suspect. The Canadians, the US, the Germans, then us. We're not the top team. There are teams better than us, and they've got better state funding. The Canadian and women and US women's teams are far better than us and have been for quite some time. I watched the Canadian Canadian World Cup 4 years ago. Those stadiums were packed. People were watching those stadiums. The criticism about that World Cup is they were using plastic pitches, 3 and 4G pitches. Well, it's in Canada, so for 6 months of the year, it's under ice and snow, so the pitches won't be in a fit state to take a kicking. I wouldn't say no one cares. I'm going to watch it because it's a chance for England to win an international tournament, and I think Scotland are in there as well. So there's a chance for British players to do really well at the highest stage in their sport. But the way it's been marketed and forced down people's throats, they've got to do it a little bit more subtly. They've got to advertise a little bit more. They really have to advertise the games a lot better. The women's but I've seen more advertising for the Women's World Cup football than the Men's Cricket World Cup, and that is really striking. So we'll have to see. The Women's FIFA World Cup. I've seen a few buses where the adverts are on the side of the bus, and because I work in the mornings on the old bin runs, collecting people's recycling and rubbish and garden waste. Yeah, absolutely. I will see buses. I've seen a few adverts for the Women's World Cup on the side of buses. I've seen one advert on the side of a bus and one advert at a train station billboard for the Cricket World Cup. One of each. Nothing on the TV. So that is really, really, really striking. And the fact that the men's GB national side in the Ice Hockey World Championships was on free-to-air TV every game. Not any coverage in any of the national newspapers. None. Couldn't find a single article. That's pretty stunning how the mainstream media is ignoring some big achievements. Really ignoring it. And I don't understand why. Because most of the major sports are on subscription TV. And a lot of people don't want to pay that money. The media's getting itself in a tangle about this. I think they are overdoing the women's promotional sport, but at the same time, it is important that as a group of people, after the age of 18, the amount of women who carry on being physically active in a non-work sense or a non-parenting sense, where they're actually going out and exercising and taking part in organised sport is very low. And that is an issue. There is a health issue with the health of the population. And if you can give them an option to, even at amateur level, I've got friends who've played amateur level football at club level locally, and they gave it up because the funding wasn't there. The pitches were crap. They didn't have a clubhouse. They had to just migrate around the various football clubs in the area to play matches, and it got frustrating. It did, but they wanted to play. So there is a willingness there for women and girls to want to play the game. And yeah, it's being hosted on a national broadcaster. That's free to air. So with that, they've gone the right way about things. Is it the right broadcaster? Is it the right channel? Probably not. But at the same time, it's a chance for the national side to do a really good thing. And if they can win it, they've done something that the men haven't done since 1966. And it's a positive. With a lot of negative that's happening in our society at the moment, if you can have a positive in there, and a positive story and win something, it gets people interested. It does increase participation. And as there are more people participate, there'll be more people watching because the quality level will go up. At the moment, I don't think the quality level of women's professional football is at the same, anywhere close. It's because Free Sports got in there when Free Sports was launched by Premier Sports as a channel. Premier Sports already showed NHL games. And Free Sports, which is the junior channel of the Premier, which is owned by Premier Sports, is their third channel. Signed the contract with the Elite League for the start of this season, so last year, and they got the rights. They signed an agreement with the National Federation, and they also got an agreement with the IIHF. They've also got a broadcast agreement with the NHL that Sky allowed to lapse. So Free Sports and Premier Sports, that group of channels, so Premier Sports basically, they have an agreement with the overseas broadcaster for the NHL on selected games of NHL Centre Ice. So they've signed an agreement with the NHL to broadcast NHL games. They've got Major League Soccer, live games. So they've signed an agreement with another major league overseas. They also have some Rugby League on there. They've got the Elite League. They've got the SHL, so the Swedish Hockey League. They've got some KHL games as well. They got the KHL. They've been very smart in the leagues they've picked up and the sports they've picked up to show. They also show a lot of motorsport. They've picked up the V8 supercars from Australia. I think, yeah, the punditry, we'll get on to women's commentators in a bit, because I think Jackie Oatley, is one of the better commentators because she's been commentating on the men's game for 20 years. I have no problem with Jackie Oatley commentating on a game or hosting a program, none at all. There are those that do, but as the studio host, or Gabby Logan, I have no issue with Gabby Logan or Jackie Oatley being the host of a highlights package or a live game. Absolutely none. Claire Balding, she is Mrs. She's Miss International Sport. Those kind of presenters. Claire Balding has been a professional equestrian, so she's competed at the highest level in a sport that is mixed. Horse racing is a mixed sport. Equestrianism is a mixed sport. Claire Balding, she's been involved at the highest level of equestrianism since a young age. Gabby Logan was a British gymnast, national professional gymnast, and obviously her husband, Kenny Logan, Scotland international rugby player. So she has a wide knowledge on professional sport. And Jackie Oatley's been commentating for nearly 20 years and involved in the media as a commentator and a media pundit for 20 years. They no issue whatsoever. Alex Scott, for the love of God, woman, I know you're she's actually one of the better pundits out there, and I have no issue with Alex Scott doing what she's doing. None. But Alex Scott has decided to go into the media post-playing, and I completely get why she's done that. And actually, to be fair, she's actually more intelligent than some of the male pundits we have. But Alex Scott notwithstanding, the others are just not cut out for media work. I don't know what it is. They just don't come across as... There is one, I forget her name. She does a lot of the commentary with Jonathan Pearce. She's been involved. She does only commentary on the women's game. And I forget her name, and it's really frustrating. She used to play for Leeds and Doncaster Bells, and I forget her name. It's really frustrating. She's a bit of a MILF, actually. But yeah, apart from Alex Scott, I can get because she's recently retired from the women's professional game. Sue Smith, yeah, I like Sue Smith because her intelligence on the women's game is second to none. And she only recently retired from playing, and she was still commentating when she was playing because she had so many injuries as well. She's a real shame because she had crazy hair and she was one of the better women's players as a trailblazer wanting to get professional. I get that. Alex Scott takes a lot of abuse, partly because of the colour of her skin, because she's mixed race, and partly because of her gender. But then you look at when people are saying we don't want ex-players from the women's game commentating, they're still ex-players. They are still gone through training, tactics. They know the game. A lot of them are fans of the game since they were kids. So they've been watching the game for 20, 30 years. Oh God, no, not Bobby Wall's widow. Christ, God, no, she'd be like old. I do think that they are overdoing it, and you've got to strike a balance. You've got to be competent at what you're doing, and I think the BBC especially is just going with, oh God, gender equality. We have to get a female commentator in there, Now, if you were to have Sue Smith commentating on a men's game, I wouldn't actually mind, because she's commentated on football for 15 years. She was even commentating when she was still a player. Every time she was pregnant with her next child or injured, she would go, I'll do some commentating. And I remember she was, I think, heavily pregnant, and she had to go from the side of the pitch, and they made her run up the piercing stairs. I mean, Christ, she's about to pop a baby out here. That's a bit wrong. So I do think there's still an issue where I think the BBC, and to a certain extent Channel 4, when they host games as well, they have gone with the we have to have an equal number of women to men, in case we're seen as sexist or homophobic or LGBT, all this kind of crap. And they are overdoing it. They have to be competent. Jackie Oatley, more than competent. Claire Balding, it's Claire Balding. I wouldn't have it any other way. She's like the female John Motson. She's been doing it since Grandstand. So Claire Balding's been doing BBC and to a certain extent ITV and Channel 4 commentary for nearly 30 years. She's not as young as you think. She's been doing it as long as I've been alive. I've always seen Claire Balding on the TV. Never had an issue with Claire Balding. Although there are people that are saying Claire Balding should be off the TV. I think, what? Mad. And Gabby Logan. Absolutely, I have no issue with them. There's a few other female presenters who are on sports programs. Again, they're pretty competent at what they do. But I looked at, when I was watching the Europa League final last year, the female presenter they had was so out of her depth. Robbie Savage, for all his flaws, was trying to carry that pitch side broadcast back to the studio. He was trying to get her out of the situation. I felt so sorry for that woman. I have no idea who she was, because I don't. But I was watching, I think it was the Europa League final this time last year, and it had the BT Sport live stream. And the female pitch side commentator was absolutely out of her depth. Completely, I have no idea who she was, but yeah, no, completely out of her depth. And it was only because Robbie Savage was there as part of the commentary team that he sort of saved the situation from really getting really embarrassingly. That's the player's name, by the way, love. Okay, he was getting her out of the situation very well. Good foil for her failing. But then I look at other sports, like I look at the NFL. Most of the pitch side experts are women. They put women in a position in a very toxic male masculinity space where if that was a bloke, it's banter. A lot of the pitch side reporters are women in American sports. That's something I've noticed. When I'm watching an American or Canadian broadcast, a lot of the if it's ice hockey or American football, the sideline reporter is a woman. And that is interesting. That's been going on now for a good 10, 15 years. They're getting more women as touchline reporters. And I don't know why that is. I really don't know why that is. I've noticed it in tennis. Is different because tennis is mixed, much like equestrianism. I have no issue with a female commentator commentating on the tennis because they've been professional for as long as the men. But I look at team sports where it's a male team sport and the pitch line reporter on the injury updates, talking to the coaches, is a woman. I'm seeing it a lot in rugby league as well. Yeah, I don't know why they do it, but they're doing it in Major League Rugby, which is obviously the new league that's come about over the last couple of years. Most of the touchline reporters, female. In fact, almost all of them, female. Really don't know why that is. It seems to be a North American thing. Ice hockey, there's a lot of them. Not all, but some team broadcasts, because you'll have the host broadcaster for the home team. Women. And some of them are very, very good at what they do. So the Colorado Avalanche woman, she's really good at what she does. I think there's one who does Hockey Night in Canada. She's really good. So to say that we don't want women commentating or involved as pundits, they have to be good enough to do it. They actually have to be good enough to do it. I think it's more of a quality over quantity. And the way they're going with this quantity is really head-scratching for me. They've had it in the rugby with Jackie Alphonse, the ex-Wigan rugby player. She's doing it in the rugby now. And I'm really scratching my head going, I don't understand why she's here. Like, I don't. She's good at what she does, but I'm trying to is it because she's Afro-Caribbean or is it because she's a woman? Or is it because both? And the network doesn't want to be seen as racist or sexist, so they put her in there. But she is coming across as Alphonse is coming across as really competent as a studio pundit and a touchline reporter. But why is she in there? Is it because she's female, or is it because she's from an ethnic minority? Is the broadcaster trying to be so politically correct they're overdoing it? there is nothing wrong with discussing this. For me, the gender of the commentator and the gender of the pundit and the gender of the presenter is irrelevant. They have to be competent at what they're doing. And the ones I've listed are competent at what they do. I have noticed it though with football, and to a certain extent with cricket as well. They're now getting female commentators in the cricket on Test Match Special and on Sky. And I've caught the occasional cricket match on Sky because I have friends who have Sky Sports, so I cheat. Not gonna lie, I cheat. But I've noticed it, and I'm thinking to myself, is the reason why she's there is not because of her talents as a commentator or as an expert on the sport, but because she's female, and they don't want to be seen as having a sexist bias on employment. Are they trying to placate the PC brigade? And I'm seeing it more and more with the mainstream media. And I don't care what the gender is. I don't care their colour of their skin, their gender, their nationality, as long as they are competent at the job they are doing. If they're not competent at the job they're doing, then it's just a quota filling. They're just filling a quota, and it does nothing to benefit women's sport or women in the media. If it's just a gender quota, it doesn't help. They have to be competent at what they do. But that the debate about women as pundits or commentators, they can be there as long as they're competent at what they do. And I do think the BBC, to a massive extent, ITV and Channel 4, Channel 5, to a certain extent, they're just putting that commentator in there to balance out the gender bias at work when it comes to applications to get to that level. And it's a bit worrying that they're not competent at what they do. They're just shoved in there. I noticed it with BT Sport last year in the Europa League final. That pitch side commentator, I've forgotten her name. She was that bad at what she was doing. I've got no issue with her being a woman. None. It's the competence level. And Robbie Savage, for all his flaws as a player and as a pundit, he actually is a half decent broadcaster. He knows what he's doing. He saved that broadcast from being an absolute farce last year. So I don't know what it is. It started in North America 25, 30 years ago, and it's come over to Europe, and it's gone to Australia and New Zealand. It's got into the cricket in the IPL. I don't know whether it's the sex appeal, and I'm using that as a term here. I don't know whether it's because it's a young, attractive female that is going to get apparently us knuckle-dragging men to watch more. We're watching the sport because it's sport. We're not watching because the sideline reporter's got big boobs and has got blonde hair. I think some of these media executives have got that in their head as well. But some of them are actually very, very good at what they do. I will admit, some of them are very, very good at what they do. Others, not so much. But it seems to be happening more and more and more. F1, Susie Wolf, she's terrible as a pundit. Yes, that was Chris Gale. Chris Gale did something where Chris Gale was being involved with a few female sideline reporters that made him uncomfortable. Daryl Sammy as well has done it. There's a couple of West Indian players who've been involved in a little bit of inappropriate behaviour that you would normally see after about 12 pints down the pub. But again, like, why put women in that position where they're gonna get inappropriate comments from some of the players, the banter that goes a bit too far? You've got to. I think you would have to be in a male-dominated world when it comes to male team sports. Yeah, you're going to have to be a very prickly character to get far. You're going to have a thick skin, and I'm not sure if we're going OTT with the PC brigade here, but some of these women are so out of their depth, and it's so embarrassing to watch because I feel sorry for them because this is their profession, and I feel so sorry for them that they've been put in a position where they're not comfortable, they're not good enough. No offense to them, and it's poor broadcasting standards because you're putting someone who's in a position they shouldn't be in. If she can bite back and go, hang on a second, you know what, I'm giving you a slap for being a sexist bastard, I would love to watch that. She'll get fired, but to knock him out, that'd be brilliant. There are some female sideline reporters who are very, very good at what they do. It's not the gender that does me, it's the competence level. And I've noticed some of them are so not competent. It is painful to watch. I've seen many a male commentator not being competent as well. So I'm not knocking the women. There are many male pundits and commentators that frustrate the hell out of me because they assume that the audience they're talking to is as thick as them, and are not great commentators. And I've noticed that more with the BBC as well, that they're getting some of these ex-players who are not really got a voice for radio and not really got a voice or a face for TV. And they're like, you're an ex-player, we'll shove you on. And I'm like, please bring back Alan Hansen. I'm begging for the day that Alan Hansen decides to get back involved with the media. I miss Alan Hansen because, well, I don't agree with everything Alan Hansen has said as a commentator and as a pundit. My God, he was far more competent than some of the crap we have today. The players that I enjoy having as pundits, the ex-players, Jermaine Genius, he's coming across as very well spoken, very intelligent, and a very, very good pundit and commentator. I like Jermaine Genius. Oh yeah, I know the female commentator you're talking about. She does Test Match Special on the BBC. She covers it for Sky as well. She normally works in partnership with Jonathan Agnew on the radio and TV. I know the one you're talking about. She really is not very good. I forget her name, and that's the problem. I forget her name. The female commentators I have named are memorable because they're good at what they do. Sue Smith, Jackie Oatley, Claire Balding, Gabby Logan. They are household names when it comes to British sports broadcasting because they're good at what they do. The cricket commentator, she's an ex-player, and I believe she was an ex-England captain, but she's not commentary material. Coaching material, absolutely. She would probably be brilliant. She knows what the game is about, but her delivery is so poor. It's like you're probably better as a coach. Oh God, it's when they got what's the female hockey player at the All-Star game in the NHL, and she blitzed many of the NHL players. She was the second quickest round the rink, and then NBC decided to make her a commentator. And I felt really sorry for her because she hadn't done any much media responsibility before. She did very, very well, and she's actually a decent commentator. Schofield, I think her name is. Kendall Coyne, right? NHL, right? She's a brilliant women's hockey player. She also appeared at the NHL All-Star weekend and got the second fastest time in the speed state competition behind Conor McDavid, obviously. NBC then decided to put her in as a sideline commentator with Pierre Maguire. Now, Pierre Maguire is a bit of a cringe at the best of times. Pierre Maguire is a divisive commentator. And, okay, she was a bit starstruck by the fact that she's commentating now in front of a packed arena, two of the best teams in the NHL, and she's on TV. As the season progressed, she got a lot better. Alison Mitchell, yes, that's her name. She's terrible. Kendall Coyne did very well as the season progressed. When she got more and more media time and more commentary and more TV time, she got so much better. It's a confidence thing with Kendall Coyne. But that initial game, she was like a deer in headlights. And she was struggling somewhat. But she knew what she was talking about. Alison Mitchell knows the game of cricket, but at the same time, her delivery is poor. She doesn't do stats. If she was doing advanced stats, she would bugger it up. Alison Mitchell is not a good commentator. Every time I hear her when I'm watching the highlights on Channel 5 or I'm listening on Test Match Special on BBC Radio, I just want to gouge my ears out. It's not because she's female, it's because she's crap. Just because she's an ex-England captain doesn't make her a good commentator. There are some of the male commentators that I'm like, can you get this twat off the radio? Like, really, there are some that are just not very good. And hence why I don't remember their names. The commentators and presenters who I've named are ones that are memorable because they're good at what they do. They are good at what they do. But there are many an ex-player male pundit that I cannot stand. Kevin Peterson is a wanker. I cannot stand him as a pundit because he's still got that ego now as an ex-player. No one cares. Damien Fleming. Damien Fleming is one of the best commentators in the world when it comes to cricket. He would know that an inexperienced commentator, which he was at one point, would make those same mistakes. He's probably made those mistakes as a male commentator, but I think he realizes it's because of her gender. She's going to be targeted more by the audience for mucking up. If that was a male, if that was an ex-player, if that was an ex-male player just new to commentary, and it was, let's say, Adam Gilchrist, and Gilchrist made a mistake, it wouldn't be a big deal. It's Adam Gilchrist, the guy's legend. If she's an ex-female commentator, she makes a mistake, people are on her saying, get her off, get her off. She's been lucky that she's worked a lot with Jonathan Agnew and Michael Vaughan with the cricket commentating she's done over here. And Michael Vaughan, he does get a bit of bashing in the media as a pundit, but he's one of the most successful England captains England's ever had. And yeah, he's one of the better ones as an ex-player to be involved with commentary, and his knowledge of the game is indisputable. But Alison Mitchell, oh, please, I know she tries hard, but she's not commentary material. She would be very well suited to being a fitness coach or coaching or as an ambassador. Absolutely. She's the face of women's cricket in this country, or she was. But then again, I barely remember her name because she's not very good at what she does. As a player, brilliant. As an ambassador through the ECB, she could do amazing things to get women involved in the game. Absolutely. Absolutely. She could be very, very good at coaching because she knows all about the technique and the dietary regime and the fitness. Absolutely. Have her as a dietary coach, have her as a fitness coach, have her as a batting coach, any kind of physiotherapist, if whatever it may be, get her involved in the coaching side of it. She'll probably be exceptionally good at what she does. But as a commentator, public speaking isn't her thing. She's not very good at it. She's only there because she's female and they're filling a quota saying we're not a sexist sport, we are open for all. And that is frustrating that sport are doing this. They are putting women in a position that they're not competent at doing. It's got nothing to do with their gender. They're just promoting them. Well, it's everything to do with their gender. They're promoting them into that position because they're female. But they're not good enough to do what they're doing. It's just to placate the PC brigade, which is wrong. You should promote based on competency and ability. Gender should be taken out of it, but gender's put back on the table by the feminist LGBT feminazis, and they demand that these women be commentators and TV hosts when they're not good enough. It boggles my mind. But you have to look at TV and media in general, the amount of female presenters. There's loads. There are loads, and the reason why they're there, they're competent. The lesser competent ones have a shorter spell on as TV presenters. They really do. They really do. Davina McCall, that's a famous British TV presenter. She actually started out as an F1 pit lane commentator for MTV. MTV was sponsoring a team in the mid-90s, and her first role with MTV was to do the pit lane. But she wasn't really covering the sport. She was just being an MTV girl asking stupid questions and parodying the sport. But she started out in the MTV on MTV as a pit lane girl because MTV was sponsoring an F1 team. It then gave her a springboard to the career she's had in British TV up to this point. The reason why she's still got a career in TV presenting and doing documentaries and being a media personality, she's good at what she does. She's competent at what she does. But her initial spell with MTV, she was like deer in the headlights, and you have to watch the reruns of her and the outtakes of her making all these mistakes when she's a young up and coming TV presenter and broadcaster. She's terrible. She learned from her mistakes, but some of these commentators have been there for 4, 5, 6 years now, and they're not very good. And I fear that the scrutiny these women are under with social media, some of the abuse these women get is just unnecessary. They're just not very good at what they do. Their gender is irrelevant in that context. They're just not competent. And there are many male commentators that are not competent as well. There are Mark Gasnier in the NRL, he is terrible as a commentator. As a commentator, he's okay, but when it comes to being actually on the panel shows, he keeps looking at the auto cue, and you can tell he's not comfortable in front of the camera, and he's not great as a commentator. When he's just behind the microphone, he's absolutely brilliant. But Mark Gasnier on TV, is crap. Not gonna lie, unless he's being interviewed, if he's the presenter, it is painful. It is absolutely painful to watch Mark Gasnier present a TV program when it comes to rugby league. He knows what he's talking about, but he has to he's not comfortable in front of the camera, and he's looking at the auto cue, and he's been doing this now for several years, and it's not great. It's painful to watch. But as a commentator, absolutely brilliant. If he's being interviewed and he's not the one presenting, he is brilliant. If he's the guest on the program, he's brilliant. But as the main presenter or as a secondary presenter, he looks at the auto cue, and you can see him constantly move his head to the auto cue, and it's not great TV. Male ex-player, he's mixed. But then there are some really, really good commentators on the NRL who are brilliant, who are ex-players, absolutely brilliant. I would say Michael Ennis has gone from being an absolute one of the most hated players of all time as a grub to one of the most loved commentators in the space of 3 years. He's gone from winning a grand final with the Cronulla Sharks and being a hooker of the year, Dally M medal winner, hooker of the year, to one of the best commentators I've ever heard commentate. He's exceptionally good at what he does. But as a player, he had that image to ruffle feathers and be prickly. But as a commentator, he's a brilliant, brilliant commentator. But it doesn't always transition that well. Gasnier being the commentator, I think he's one of the weaker commentators of the ex-players. Corey Parker, brilliant. I could listen to Corey Parker all day commentate, because he also has had a radio show for a very long time in Brisbane. So Corey Parker, brilliant. He's been involved doing his media responsibilities for a long time as a player and now as an ex-player. Brilliant. Could listen to him all day long. But yeah, the debate about TV commentary and are they good enough? Are they not good enough? I think I haven't heard enough of Jonathan Thurston to really make judgment. But Jonathan Thurston, as time went on, in front of the camera when he was doing interviews or little segments for the Footy Show, he got more and more comfortable with being interviewed. Not everyone is good in front of the camera, but I've noticed with sport they are media coaching them a lot more. But Jonathan Thurston, JT, future immortal, one of the best players ever to play the game. He's going to have a lot of knowledge of the sport, absolutely. But I haven't heard enough of his commentary. But I don't think I actually have heard any of his commentary. But from what I've read, he's really settling into that role really well. But because he's a star player, he's been in front of the camera a lot over his career, doing interviews, doing little segments for TV, documentaries. He's been involved with the media for a very, very long time. But I look at some of his contemporaries like Michael Ennis and Corey Parker, and they are ahead of him because Corey Parker's been on the radio for years, and Michael Ennis has done segments on NRL 360 while he was a player. Benji Marshall's going to get involved in the media as well when he retires, because he's done a lot of segments on NRL 360. So is James Graham. I think James Graham will stay involved with the media a bit over here in the UK or back over in Australia. Jamie Peacock and Earl Crabtree over here in the UK. Earl Crabtree is brilliant as the pundit. Absolutely brilliant. Ashton Sims, brilliant as a pundit as well. He does a lot of TV work over here in the UK. They're going to have full-time roles in the media when they retire, I have no doubt. Earl Crabtree, one of my favourite players, plays his entire career with the Huddersfield Giants. He's brilliant. He's got that Yorkshire twang and a very broken nose, so he's not the most aesthetically pleasing faces on TV. But Earl Crabtree is an absolute brilliant media personality. I follow him on Twitter. He follows me on Twitter, by the way. Earl Crabtree follows me on Twitter. I think he watched my video on him that I did on the channel as one of my favourite players. Because Earl Crabtree follows me on Twitter. And I follow him back, and he's really good fun. He really is actively involved in the community in Huddersfield. He's actively involved as a fundraiser. He does a lot of community stuff. Earl Crabtree is I think, what any aspiring professional sportsman should want to be post-retirement from playing, is still actively involved in community coaching, community youth programs, charity events, actively involved in the community in which he played for so long. Earl Crabtree, check him out. He's an ex-player over here in the UK who's doing great things in the media and great things around the Huddersfield area. He's brilliant. He does a lot of public speaking events, charity events. He's very good at what he does. He does a lot of fun running. He does a lot of tough mudders, all sorts. I know he's brilliant. Ashton Sims, he's done a lot of work for the BBC as well. A lot of punditry. He's great fun, Ashton Sims. He's really great fun. He's a funny guy. I can see him when he retires going back over to Australia and doing a lot of media work as well. Because he's hilarious. He's funny. He's very good at what he does. He does a lot of work with the British media. Even though he's based out in Canada with the Wolfpack, he does a lot of work with the British media. He's really good fun when he's on TV. He's really funny, and he actually is so relaxed when he's doing it as well. It's unreal. His how relaxed he is. I think he's going to do really well in commentary when he fully retires from playing in about a year or so's time. Whether he stays over here or in Canada or goes back to Australia to do commentary, he's really, really good fun to watch. He's funny. Jamie Peacock, he's been doing it now for a long time. He's pretty good as a pundit. One of the greatest players we've ever produced. He does great things. I'm surprised we haven't got Adrian Morley on the old telly more often, but he's involved with his coaching. I think I've watched a lot of the Major League Rugby, and the commentary on that isn't the best, I will admit, but it's getting better. A lot of them are local commentators who played amateur or semi-pro rugby in the US and Canada, and it's getting better. I would say they're getting better at being commentators on live broadcasts. There are one or two who are really, really good. They will get better as time progresses. The MLS commentators, a lot of them are from the Hispanic community. They're fun. They get properly into it when goals are scored. They go mad. With some of these minor sports, commentary can make or break it. And I've noticed as time has gone on, these minor sports, the commentary is getting better and better, but it takes time. And if they haven't had the media exposure, you're not going to get that good quality commentator. You need that media exposure, and then that commentator can slot in. But it is what it is. I mean, commentary is a big part of sport. I didn't expect us to talk so long about like TV commentary and the fact that there are so many female pundits now on TV. I get the frustration with many. I'd much rather they're competent at what they do. And I say that about the men's commentary as well. There's some really bad commentary. Like I cannot stand Phil Neville as a coach. He's doing great things with the women's team. As a commentator, I'd rather watch paint dry. It's like scratching my ears out. But Jamie Carragher as a pundit, he spits at kids. So there are loads of issues with Paul Merson. Jesus Christ, I don't know. Is Paul Merson just there for shits and giggles? I think he is because he's not actually that good. Some of the like Jermaine Genus, I like Jermaine Genus. It's a shame his career was cut short by injury. He's very intelligent, very well spoken, and he's quite good. I've seen the Aussie rules game. I'm not following it as religiously as I used to. I'm following the NRL more the last couple of years, but yeah, no, Rebecca Madden. I have a fair bit of time for, but the NRL. There's a couple as well in the NRL who are sideline reporters, and yeah, they've got their own little program now in the NRL where they have like the 5 women panel. They're basically the 5 women who are actually competent at commentary in the NRL. They're the ones who actually are competent at what they do. League Light, I think it is, isn't it? It's League Light where they talk with all the female panel. There are some good female commentators, and they're there because they're good at what they do. The bad ones, or the ones that struggle, I do feel sorry for them because of the rise of social media. And this is where we get back to Israel Folau. And I said I would talk about Israel Folau on this. And the reason why he's in the shit he's in is it's not because of his religious views, which are evangelical Christianity, which I don't particularly am not a big fan of. It's because he was told about his social media content. If you get a new contract, which they gave him, behave. And it was in his contract to be mindful of his social media content and what was allowed and what wasn't. and he made a statement that was deemed political or offensive, and he was told in his contract not to do it, and he did it. So that's where Israel Folau fell down. The fact that he was badly advised and Rugby Australia have mishandled things, there's a reason why we are where we are, and I can discuss, as I say, the issues with Rugby Australia for days. The issues with Rugby Australia go back 20, 30 years. They were the driving force behind professionalism, yet professionalism has actually slowly killed the sport in Australia. There's your problem. It hasn't benefited all. And in reality, professional rugby union in Australia is second, third, fourth fiddle to other sports. Other sports are better organised at grassroots level. They have better tier structure of the game where you can improve and go up the tiers as a player. There's more opportunities for Aussie rules and rugby league players to reach the top level. And Israel Folau, he's not even actually an Australian. He's a Samoan, so it makes it even worse. He's not even an Aboriginal. He's from the South Sea Islands. He's a Polynesian, and it doesn't help. This is the problem. They're now facing an exodus of Polynesian players from Australian Rugby Union because they're not producing enough Aboriginal and European Aussies to fill that gap. So there's a production issue of players developing players from the local communities rather than importing Polynesians who are decent youth players that get high school diplomas and high school, what's the term? Scholarships. They're not producing enough grassroots levels in the local communities, so they have to rely on scholarship players from Samoa, Tonga, and Fiji to fill the gap. That's part of the problem with Rugby Australia. They're not developing enough youth players. Then, when they are developing players, they're losing out. When they hit 18, 19, they switch codes because there's more money in Rugby League or Aussie rules. Also, the TV coverage isn't great. It's declining, and I think the pay-per-view TV want to drop Rugby Union. The TV audience isn't there, the crowds isn't there, and the second tier, the shoot shield, the blowout games, the imbalance is an issue. But the big problem for Australian Rugby Union is the way they handled the Western Force and the way they gave the amount of money to Israel Folau is almost the equal amount of money that's being asked per year. They put one player before a whole squad of players, and that's not good. If you want to keep developing players, you keep Western Force. In Super Rugby, they chose not to. They chose to drop Western Force, and that has not helped because Western Force are now not playing in Super Rugby. They're playing in the lesser Asian Cup competition. Still a top-level Rugby Union competition, but less exposure, less money, and the crowds are less. So while Western Force is still going as a team, the damage has been done to the image of Australian Rugby Union because the amount of money Western Force were asking for is nearly the amount of money they gave to Israel Folau per year on a 4-year contract. They put one player above a whole squad of players, which could have developed a superstar like Israel Folau. And you've lost Nick Cummings to the game, the Honey Badger. He's now left the game to become a TV personality. You've lost the Honey Badger, one of my favourite wingers, Nick Cummings, to the game because you put Israel Folau first. Enough said. You've lost a talented Australian player to the game and a whole squad of players to Super Rugby for one player who's a homophobe. It's not right. That is mismanagement of funds at its highest level. They put the future of Australian rugby in the hands of one player rather than having 5 strong, stable Super Rugby franchises that could develop a whole nation worth of players. The fact that Nick Cummings, the Honey Badger, is now a TV personality speaks volumes of the situation that Australian Rugby Union find itself in, with Riding Castle at the head. Oh dear. The fact that even in New Zealand, the game is losing money and there's a funding issue speaks volumes of the state of the game in the Southern Hemisphere. The fact that all the money is in Europe. While the All Blacks and the Aussies and the South Africans have the most World Cup wins between them, and they've dominated the World Cup apart from England winning that one tournament, the finances of the game in the Southern Hemisphere is a mess. All the money is in Japan and in Europe and North America. That's where the money's at. And you've got to look at the Major League Rugby. Look at Major League Rugby and the amount of Australian and Kiwi and South African players who are leaving Super Rugby. They might have only played 10 games in Super Rugby. They might have played 100. And they're leaving Super Rugby and they're playing in the US in the Major League Rugby because there's more money. They get paid. They're guaranteed a paycheck. The game is growing rapidly. Massive investment. They're going to Europe. Oh, look, you can't represent your national side now. If you've gone outside of Australia or New Zealand, South Africa, unless there's special rulings in place, no, you're not going to be selected for the World Cup this year. Yeah. Selection issues, the selection policies of the All Blacks, of the Wallabies, of the Springboks is also killing the sport because the best players want to get paid for their services. Where are they going to get paid? Europe and North America, and to a certain extent, Japan. That's where the money is. They're leaving the Southern Hemisphere en masse. And, oh, look, you're not eligible for selection anymore. I'm getting paid. I can feed my family. I think I'll stick in Europe, thank you very much. Yeah, they are leaving Rugby Union at an alarming rate from the Southern Hemisphere. And even if the All Blacks and New Zealand has an issue with financing the game, that says something. That says something. The fact that if you look at crowd numbers, they're not great. They're not great. If that's a rugby league game with the New Zealand Warriors versus any team from Australia, Mount Smart is nearly packed for the available seating they allocate for NRL games. Nearly packed. Okay? You put the Highlanders versus the Sunwolves, same stadium, if they were to use it, it's not packed. There's empty seats all over the place. While the interest is there, absolutely. I mean, the All Blacks are the best team of all time. And the way Rugby Union players are treated in New Zealand is like demigods. Absolutely. The issues is, apart from the 5 New Zealand teams playing each other, the crowds aren't there. Same in Australia at Super Rugby and South Africa. And to a certain extent, the Sunwolves actually were selling out stadiums in Japan. They've been dropped from Super Rugby. It's mad. What's the point of expanding there if you're going to terminate them, on the eve of the World Cup? What is the point of putting all that effort in to get a team in Japan only to screw them over? There's no point, is there? That's why Super Rugby is so badly run, is they've wasted all that money. And the Jaguares, they're not filling out stadiums either. There is a massive issue with Super Rugby and the amount of empty seats. And South Africa, just look at that. They barely fill the stadiums they're playing in. And rugby is religion in South Africa. So things have gone wrong, massively wrong with Rugby Union in these countries, massively wrong. The warm-up games, I'm not overly fussed with the Cricket World Cup to a point because it's not as easily accessible as other international sporting events have been. The World Championship Ice Hockey was great fun to watch Great Britain. And guess what? They're still showing games on Free Sports and Premier Sports. So I'm really surprised that the BBC doesn't make more of a deal of it. And the mainstream media in this country are not really making much reference of what Great Britain have done. And I don't get that. It's a growing sport. Now, do they fear that growing sport because their obsession with football and Rugby Union, Rugby League and cricket? Or something else? Because great things were done at the World Championships and by Great Britain. The fact they're going to be back there for another year is a massive boost to the sport in this country. And the exposure of these players and the domestic game is going to get abroad. Yeah. Massive exposure abroad. But anyway. Yeah, Australia beating England in a warm-up game. It's a warm-up game. Warm-up games mean sod all. You're not in the actual tournament. It's just squad selection. It's just rotating players. When the real tournament gets going, that's when you're playing competitively to win. Warm-up games before a major international tournament don't mean as much as people think. It's not Super 18 anymore. It's just Super Rugby now. They've reduced the number to 15 teams again. The issues with Super Rugby is the management, the crowd numbers. and the fact that Super Rugby is bleeding players to North America and Europe and Japan. So many players want to play their professional rugby union outside of the Southern Hemisphere now. It's unreal. And the mismanagement of the club game is having an effect on the international game. And Australia's, as I say, Rugby Australia's a prime example of where they're going wrong. They're bleeding players to Europe, who then make themselves unavailable for selection unless it's the Matt Giteau rule, which is rarely enforced. They're losing players to Rugby League and AFL at youth level, at under 20s level, under 19s. And the Israel Folau saga showing the mismanagement of where the money's going. So, yeah, there will be an effect on New Zealand eventually. There is a money issue. There's the debate about the South Sea Island nations of Samoa, Tonga, and Fiji, and especially Tonga and Fiji. This restructuring of the International Rugby Union. There's a lot of issues. Rugby Union is actually proving itself to be a really badly run international sport. The IRB, the International Rugby Board, has now become World Rugby. They've rebranded themselves, and some of the issues that were there have grown. And professionalism was driven by New Zealand and Australia. They drove professionalism. They were the driving force behind turning the game into a professional sport. And the Kiwis didn't want South Africa to join the Super Rugby system, even though they had dropped apartheid. They were very much against it. And I think that still resonates a little bit today. There's still a bit of distrust between those two nations. Australia, domestically, the game is in chaos. And it's getting in the press for all the wrong reasons. And then you got to look at the fact that all three of these nations are bleeding players to Europe and North America, and to a certain extent, Japan. Players that are still eligible, really top level. They're still at the peak of their powers. Are going, next season I'm going to go to Japan to play, or I'm going to go to Europe to play. I don't want to play in Super Rugby anymore. I'm going to go and test myself in the Northern Hemisphere. They're being lost to the international game because they're not getting paid enough, because they cannot be afforded to be paid enough, because there's not enough money in Super Rugby, and that's a problem. The money isn't there. Professionalism has had some unintended negative consequences that weren't foreseen in 1995. The game has grown massively as a sport since 95. It's grown faster than the professional game can keep up with the money. While the money is there, it's not being organised in the best way. And it's trying to play catch up with Rugby League in the sense that Rugby League has been established as a professional sport for so long, and it's trying to catch up with football or soccer, depending where you live around the world, and other professional sports in the Northern Hemisphere that are far better organised. The money's there, the fan base is there, the TV revenues are there, and Rugby Union is playing catch up. And now that it's reached a point that it has, the professional game in Europe is where you want to play. The money is now in America, so that Major League Rugby is going to expand rapidly in the next couple of years. And the quality level is actually surprisingly really, really good in Major League Rugby. For the level that they play out, the quality level is actually surprisingly good, and it will be a positive springboard. The crowds are getting better. There's one or two teams that possibly need better stadiums and better infrastructure, but no, the crowds are there, and some of the stadiums are selling out. Crowds are growing year on year. I think Major League Rugby is going to be pretty healthy going forward. Pro 14, the issue is the Welsh. The Welsh club game is the issue, although that's gone very quiet this summer. If you look at you're watching the ice hockey. I'm assuming if it's Setanta, you're in Ireland. Over here, it'll be on Free Sports or Premier Sports, which is filled the gap that Setanta had, and they're doing a very, very good job. Canada, they haven't got the strongest team they could possibly have. There are players like Sidney Crosby and Conor McDavid who are missing. If you put those guys in the lineup, you're going to see a completely different Canadian side. They're the two best players in the league. They're both missing. The Team Canada they've got is a very young team, and they're not the best Canadian side that's ever taken to the ice. The reason is the Stanley Cup playoffs are still going on, and that is the issue with the World Championships and the Stanley Cup playoffs. And if you want, and the argument is from North America, why don't we have the World Championships in August and September? There's a problem with that. All the European leagues start their seasons in August and September, so you won't have it. You'll have even less players available. Not all the European leagues have their top players playing in North America, all the European nations. So there's no perfect time of the year to have the World Championships, so to speak, because height of summer, it's actually harder to maintain the ice surface than in autumn and spring and winter. I've got friends and work colleagues who play in the summer league, which is the rec league, which is completely amateur. It's like beer league hockey in the US and Canada. And yeah, the ice surface is nowhere near as good as it is mid-season in winter. It's because the outside temperature affects the temperature of the building. You have to put the temperature controls in. It costs more money to the energy levels. You know, it is what it is. The ice surfaces aren't as good in summer, really. They're lesser ice surfaces. So it's just the time of year. But the fact that the Canadians have got through to the medal playoff, the medal rounds, and they have a 1 in 4 chance of winning a medal, the US haven't got to the medal rounds. So that's a one-up for the Canadians, considering their defeat last year at the Olympics. But again, the Olympic debate with ice hockey is the NHL is not at the moment allowing its players to play at the Olympics, partly because the Olympics last year were in Korea. So the TV timings are all out for the US and Canadian markets, which is part of the reason why. If the NHL released its players like they do for the World Championships to play at the Olympics, more people would watch the Olympic ice hockey tournament. More people would watch. But you know, this is ice hockey without the fighting. Basically, the World Championships, their view on fighting is different to club level, like NHL or SHL or Elite League or whatever league you watch. So, in that sense, it's the more of the skill game. This is the skill game, basically. This is some big hits will go in. There'll be some big body checks. There'll be some rough and tumble. But this is more of the skill players that play at the World Championship. So there's certain players that aren't there, like Milan Lucic. He is a thug. He's an animal. Zdeno Chara, he's past his best now. Dustin Bufflin, Ben Sherratt. So two of my favourite players who are big, burly defensemen aren't playing for USA and Canada. Dustin Bufflin's been injured for half the season, but Ben Sherratt's had 2 outstanding seasons. He's Canadian, not selected. He's a defender's defenseman. He will stay at home and he'll put body checks in for 60 minutes. He's not there. So this is more of the skill game that you're seeing at the World Championships. If you were to watch the NHL or domestic ice hockey competitions, there is fighting. It's more physical. There's rough and tumble with the skill. So, you know, the fact that the Canadians are winning a medal game in the semi-finals, want to get to the final, that will then turn the Canadian audience on because there's no Canadian team in the Stanley Cup final this year because it's Boston, St. Louis. The fact the US team is out, a lot of the American fans who don't follow St. Louis or Boston will also want to watch that. So the TV audience will be pretty high for the World Championship final because the Canadians are there. The US are knocked out, which is a shame, but there'll be some non-St. Louis Blues, Boston Bruins fans who will want to watch the World Championships. The European nations, our seasons are finished a long time ago, so the European audience is going to be very, very high. The Russians take it more seriously than the KHL when it comes to the national side because the best Russian players do play in the NHL. So you got to look at the players that are available for various nations. They're more the skilled players. If you want to see ice hockey at its truest and most natural form, you have to watch the domestic leagues, the various levels of professionalism in North America and Europe, and you will see hockey at what it really is: skill and brute force. The issue is some countries have fallen away when it comes to ice hockey. They used to have, Ireland, for example, has really dropped away. Until about 4 or 5 years ago, there were no rinks in the Republic, which is a massive crying shame because hurling is a big sport. And of course, you take hurling all across and you give them ice skates, you've got ice hockey in a form. Or shinty, you give them an arena, you've got the basis of ice hockey. Some countries, it has fallen away massively. The fact that Kenya has an international ice hockey team. Yeah, Kenya are ranked 44th in the world. but people weren't expecting that. Argentina play it. Australia, New Zealand. So there are countries that you wouldn't expect playing ice hockey who play. But yeah, it's more of a winter sport, and some of these countries it's very, very warm and hot, and ice melts. But no, Kenya have an ice hockey team. The United Arab Emirates have an ice hockey team. So yeah, there are countries that you would expect not to have a winter sport playing winter sport. So I used to work in a law firm, and the woman I used to work with, her dad used to play for the Iraqi national side. So yeah, there are some really bizarre places where ice hockey is played. But when it comes to global sport, it's not as big as football or rugby union. Only I think 82 countries are IIHF affiliated, so they're basically sanctioned by the IIHF. So that's their version of FIFA. But no, the fact that places like the UAE and Kenya have ice hockey teams and leagues speaks volumes about where the sport is going. But the fact that Canadians are actually winning a medal game, that's going to interest the Canadian market, where 75% of Canadians have actually played ice hockey at some point in their lives as an organised sport outside of school. So that says something about the psyche of the country. When Canada don't win gold, it's seen as a failure, and the players cop the abuse from the fans. It's an interesting one. The fact that there's a lot going on in sport today, so I'm going to have to cover a fair few topics. So I'm going to have to wind this live stream down in a minute. But if there's any more questions, feel free to wrap them in before I go. I'm going to give it another 10 minutes. If you've got any more questions, feel free to get them in now. I'll do my best to answer them as best as I possibly can. I know I've spent a lot of time today talking about female commentators, and that is a big talking point in sport. Is the female commentator? For me, it's. Oh, yeah, you have come in a little bit late, but, if you've got any questions, whack them in really quick. Just literally whack your question in quick. What's the power? Okay, a power play. Okay, as you're new to the sport, when in football rugby, there's a penalty given against or a foul given against. So we'll talk rugby union. When in rugby union, rugby league, there's a penalty, the opposition just gets the ball back and they can start play again or have a kick at the post, kick for the corner or tap and go. When there's a penalty in ice hockey, the offending team, that player, has to sit in the penalty box for 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. It depends on the length of the penalty and the severity, and the opposition have a one-man advantage. So that's a power play. So the power play is the opposition have committed an offence. That offending player has gone to the penalty box, much like a sin bin in rugby union, but he can come back on if a goal is scored. A sin bin in rugby union is 10 minutes. So that is basically a power play. If you are new to the sport of ice hockey, there is a guy that I'm a YouTuber. I'm gonna subscribe for you. Tell you about. Type in the hockey guy. He's a Canadian. He's my pen pal. I've sent him 3 jerseys, a lot of programs. I write him letters. I keep in contact with him on Twitter and vice versa. Check out the hockey guy. He's a YouTuber. Tell him that I sent you. Just when you leave a message on your comment section, tell him the Sports Boffin sent you over this way from a live stream. If you want to learn anything about hockey, he's the best guy, because I'm not necessarily the best of describing some of the rules. He's possibly the best guy to watch and learn from. He's got all his playlists. He does actually do videos for new fans because the NHL has expanded with Vegas. So lots of new people are now watching the sport in North America. He does have a lot of European viewers. And just check out the hockey guy. He's the best guy I think I could send you to. You've also got Post to Post as well, another Canadian father-son team who are also YouTubers who deal with hockey. They again also have a lot of European viewers. They were in a little battle at one point, and the hockey guys surged ahead, and Post to Post have sort of got stuck in second place. They're the 2 hockey YouTubers I would happily send you to. There are a few others, but they're the ones I think have the most knowledge, because Post to Post, the son is an ex-player and the dad is an ex-official, who goal scoring official. So he would, penalty box, he would write down the penalties and he would do all that kind of officiating, off-ice officiating. So they've been involved in the sport their entire lives. And the hockey guy, he's a hardcore fan with over 500 jerseys in his collection, and he knows everything about everything. They're the guys I would send you to. So check out the Hockey Guy and Post to Post, and literally go through their playlists. Try and find a video where they're describing the rules. The Hockey Guy's got a few videos up on his channel when he's describing things for new fans. And even if you can't find that video, just watch his stuff and he'll explain a lot of things. That you'll pick up very, very quickly. I've been watching ice hockey since I was like 3 years old. It is hard to explain all the rules, but the power play basically is the opposition have committed an offence on the field. The player's been sent to the penalty box. Think of it like a sin binning in rugby, except when the opposition score, unless it's a 2+2. If it's a 4-minute penalty, if the first goal was scored with more than 2 minutes remaining, he has to remain in the penalty box. If it's a 2+10, so that's a misconduct penalty, another player will sit the penalty alongside him for the 2 minutes. The goal is scored, that player can go back on, but the player has to sit out for the rest of the 10 minutes away from the game. If he's a match or a game misconduct, he's thrown out. So there are a lot of rules in there. But once you get watching ice hockey a couple of games, you'll pick it up. When you watch ice hockey, when you watch a few games, you pick it up. Mr. Huss, yes, the talk about the pay gap, we've actually discussed it earlier on in the live stream with Fran Kirby, the England women's player, wanting equal pay. We have discussed it. We've discussed also women's commentary. So if you watch the live stream when we've uploaded it, you'll see the discussion we have about women's commentators and their competence. There is a big chat about it in a variety of sports. Only in one country is there equal pay between men and women, and that is in Norway. But you have to look at the society that Norway is, and the fact that to have a pay gap is illegal under Norwegian law. They're very, very much equal pay in Norway, and in sport, the Football Federation of Norway said when you represent your national side, you should get an equal representation fee. Your match fee should be the same. So that debate in Norway has been settled years ago, but it did start a debate in other countries. It's over here at the moment. The pay gap. I mean, it's going to be there. The women's NBA versus the men's NBA. The women's NBA has been going for over 20 years. That debate about the pay gap again is there, but I can't name you a single female basketball player at the top level. I could not name you a single women's player. Not because I don't don't care that they're playing. Firstly, I'm not a big basketball fan. You know this. I know that you are, but I'm not a big basketball fan. But the fact that there's not even one female player that I could name for you, whereas I could name you a whole host of current and ex NBA players who are men, that says a lot. It does say a lot about the US women's national. What is the US? Oh God. I'm assuming that's the soccer team, the women's football team. That's what I'm assuming that is, the women's soccer team. Women's soccer team, yeah, Abby Wambach. I could name you. Hope Solo. There are lots of women's players in the football or soccer, as you would say, that I do know of in the past, present. Yeah. When it comes to women's football, I know a few household names. But when it comes to women's basketball, and this is where the debate about equal pay comes from, is the women's NBA has been going as a professional league now for 25 years, I think. As a sister league to the NBA. The teams keep moving. They're small crowds. They are paid. Don't get me wrong. They're paid a decent wage. They get decent money. But I could not name you a single women's basketball player. Whereas LeBron James, Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, I could list off loads of male basketball. Even though I'm not an NBA fan, I could list you off so many male basketball players, past and present. The comparison isn't there. I mean, if they want to get equal pay, the debate's going to be there, but at the same time, they're not getting the exposure. The crowds are poor. The quality level is nowhere near as high as the men's game for skill. The effort's there. Don't get me wrong. The effort and the training they put in and the effort they put in is there. It's the same in any women's sport. They put the training and the effort in at professional level. It's the actual skill set they have, the quality that they have, and and the media exposure they get. There's a reason why the Canadian Women's Hockey League failed, because the league wasn't making any money. Sport not only is entertainment, it's also a business. And if you're playing at a professional level, you've got to make money. That league has to make money. And the Women's Hockey League in Canada went bust, not because the players weren't putting the effort in and training every day. They weren't making any money. So, and apart from Kendall Coyne, I could not name you a single women's hockey player off the top of my head. And that is sad because where I live in the UK, my local team, the Bracknell Queen Bees, are the national champions like 8 out of the last 10 years, and half the women's national side are Bracknell players where I live in the UK on the women's elite league. My local team are the women's champions. Half their team are the women's national GB national side. I know a few of them personally from town, from where I live locally, but I could not name them any top level household names off the top of my head because there aren't any. It's the exposure. It's the lack of exposure that is damning as well. And it's the small media presence. There's not enough money, and it goes hand in hand. The equal pay debate, only in Norway is there equal pay in sport at professional level in any sport, and it's football and ice hockey are the two major professional sports. And football was the only one where both women and men are professional, I believe, in team sports. Outside of the alpine skiing and curling and things like that, the big major team sport, only women and men equal pay. So we can debate the women's equal pay. Only one country has really implemented it, and we've discussed women's commentators and equal pay earlier. So the fact you're asking the question, we've been talking about it throughout this live stream, women's involvement in sport. The fact that you're saying what we've been discussing pretty much sums it up. We're all sports fans here, but looking at the discussion we've had about women's sport and women's pay and women commentators, when I look at my analytics and the percentage of viewers who identify as women, it's only 7.6% in the last month, and it's only 6% roughly all time. So the sports discussion, be it women's sport or men's sport, it does not matter. Sport in general, the audience is the majority of over 90% over all sports is men. Now, if you break it down sport by sport, Rugby League in the World Cup 2 years ago, a quarter of my views were women, just on the Rugby League videos. So certain sports do attract more female viewers, especially when it comes to the national side playing. But in a general rule, the percentage of sports viewership, women make less than 10% across the board. So if you were to take the men's game, the women's game in the same sport, we'll look at ice hockey because I follow the NHL. Let's take the men's game. 90% of those fans are going to be men. So let's say the Chicago Blackhawks, their arena holds for the ice hockey. We're not talking about the Chicago Bulls. I think it's 23,000. For the ice hockey, it's about just over 21,000 capacity. So let's call it 20,000 capacity, right? Let's go with that. 10% of that fan base is going to be women on average. So that's 2,100 fans will be women. If you were to get 2,100 women to watch a women's league game, the league makes money. The issue is a lot of those women fans also do not watch or participate in women's sport. So if 10% on average is the audience of a professional sports game, and 90% is men, and you have the women's game, and not all those women are going to watch that women's game, and you can take that capacity and you work out the numbers of women at that game, they're getting a couple of hundred people at most at games. So that's less than half. There's your debate there in a nutshell about women's equal pay. Not enough females watch the women's game. If you had 2,100 people watching a women's professional game, league game, forget the internationals, league game, that league could sustain itself if you had the right ticketing price. It could sustain itself. Because men's ice hockey around the world, some of the lower leagues, are averaging about 2,000 to 3,000 fans, and the league is sustainable. So if you were to get women's sport where 2,000 to 3,000 fans turn up to watch a game week in, week out, the league can sustain itself. They're not. They're getting 10% of that. They're getting 200 to 300 maximum. There's your problem. I use the Chicago Blackhawks as an example because they have the biggest capacity in the NHL, and I know the capacity numbers. Same with women's sport. I look at Chelsea, very successful women's side. Arsenal and Arsenal, successful women's side. Chelsea men play at Stamford Bridge. Chelsea ladies play at AFC Wimbledon's ground, which is in Kingston upon Thames, which is nowhere near Chelsea. So first up, their home ground is not even in the area of London they play for the men's team. Secondly, it's actually played at by a different professional side. And thirdly, they can barely fill it. So there you go. Man City women play in the Academy Stadium, which is over the road from the Etihad. I think Liverpool women play at Tranmere, which is on the other side of the River Mersey. Yeovil ladies, I think, are the only women's side to play in the same ground regularly, which is Hughes Park in Yeovil. I'm using the examples of crowd numbers, and I'm not trying to belittle the women. The effort they put in, I have lots of female friends who've played for the Queen Bees, which is Bracknell Bees women's team, who are national champions for this year. I've had a friend who's played there for years. I've got a few other friends who play for them. I've got friends who've played in the local amateur football around the area. I've got friends who play at the local rugby club. There are sports teams out there where women play. I've got friends who do it. I'm not knocking them for doing it. I commend them for doing it. They put the effort in. They play hard. They play very hard. They put the effort in. But yeah, we've had the debate about touchline reporters. A lot of them are women in men's sport, and some of them aren't very good. It's nothing to do with their gender. It's the quality of media. They're only there because the media company is fearing the backlash from the PC lefty brigade if they don't have a female commentator involved or a female presenter involved. They're just promoting them based on gender alone, not on competence. That's not me belittling the commentator there. They're there because they're there. It's because the media company puts them there. The commentators I've named, like Jamie Hirsch, she's very, very good at what she does in the NHL. I have no problem with Jamie Hirsch in the NHL. Kendall Coyne, she's grown into the role. She has grown into the commentary role with NBC. Her initial broadcast with Pierre Maguire was a bit cringe, but that's partly because Pierre Maguire was probably trying to save her from the heat she was going to get online. She did very well. For a first-time commentator, Kendall Coyne did very, very well. And she's grown into that role. And I can see her, as time goes on, getting more and more commentary time. But so many female commentators are only there because of their gender. And sometimes because of their ethnicity as well. And they're not very good. I don't know what the NFL has this obsession with the NFL with having the touchline reporter who's a woman. We've had this discussion throughout the live stream, and I want to move away from it a little bit. But yeah, the question's been asked before. And what's the obsession with female pundits when it comes to discussing men's sport? I don't get it either. But over here in the UK, we do have a lot of female sports presenters, and a lot of them are ex-sportsmen. Well, women, should I say. Gabby Logan. They do want to become more inclusive, but I want you to check out a few of these people online. Gabby Logan, ex-British gymnast. Husband is Kenny Logan, ex-Scotland Rugby Union international, and one of the best players to play the game in the 90s. No doubt. I'm not denying that. Her husband was a brilliant player. She's obviously been following her husband playing rugby for years, and she was an athlete herself. Claire Balding, check her out. She's an ex-equestrian professional. She's been involved in equestrianism, so that's show jumping and eventing all her life. Her brother was a jockey, and I think also what was it? A horse race trainer. She's been involved with horse racing and equestrianism her entire life. She's been involved in presenting sport for 30 years. Love Claire Balding. If Claire Balding wasn't doing a sports broadcast or wasn't considered, I'll be very upset. She's pretty good. Jackie Oatley, football commentator, soccer commentator here in the UK, and presenter. Jackie Oatley, absolutely brilliant at what she does. She's been doing it for 20 years. No issue with that. Alex Scott, ex-women's professional, pundit on the men's game. To be fair, she's actually pretty intelligent. She knows what she's talking about, but a lot of people are kicking off because she's a woman talking about the men's game. But you're not complaining when Claire Balding's presenting the programme or Gabby Logan's presenting the programme. But when Alex Scott's on the programme, you kick off. I don't understand that. I find it weird, but I have to admit, they are just putting women in positions to placate the PC brigade and to be seen as more inclusive. Absolutely. They have to be competent at what they're doing. They have to understand what they're doing. And they have to have an idea what they're commentating about. We've had this discussion throughout the live stream for the last 2 hours. The ones I've named, like Jamie Hirsch in the NHL, she's brilliant at what she does. Absolutely brilliant at what she does. When the broadcast that I managed to watch that she's on, absolutely 110%, she deserves to be there because she is intelligent about what she's talking about and she's very competent. She's brilliant. Kendall Coyne, she's brilliant. She's really growing into the role. She is growing into the commentary role. Now that her career is winding down a little bit, she's growing into that role and she's very, very good at it. There's a few others in North America when it comes to the major league sports that are pretty good at what they do. But there are some others there who are just there because they're a woman. Either to look good or because the company that's employing them, the media company, wants to be inclusive because the PC brigade, the lefty PC brigade, has gained a lot of influence over the last 10 years. I would rather see a female commentator there who is competent at what they do because of their abilities rather than their gender. That is where true equality comes from. They have to be good enough to do it, regardless of their background, colour, and gender. If they are not one of those, if they're not good enough, and it's because their colour, their background, or their gender that they've got the position, that's wrong. That's discrimination in itself. If the female commentator, like the ones I've listed off, have got there by right, that's more better for gender equality in sport than just promoting a woman because she's a woman. Because you've got to see what the TV audience or the internet streaming audience is putting in the comments. Oh yeah, there are plenty of male commentators who are absolutely hopeless. Phil Neville, for all his qualities as a coach with the women's national side, he's doing great things. Let's not knock him for that. As a commentator, he's not got a voice for commentary. He knows what he's talking about, but he's got a really bad commentary voice. He's got a little bit of a dreary monotone voice. As a coach and as an intelligent analyst, absolutely. Out of the class of 92, I would rather meet Phil Neville than any of the others out of the class of 92. Robbie Savage notwithstanding. Phil Neville and Robbie Savage, out of the class of 92 of Man United, are the ones who've had the least scandal in their lives because they are footballing brains. Robbie Savage, for all his flaws, he's on the Freddie Flintoff, Robbie Savage and the Ping Pong Guy podcast, which is brilliant. Martin Tyler's crap. I'm not even going to hide that. Martin Tyler is crap. He is crap. I don't know why he's still there. Clive Tilsley, my cousin went to school with his son, so I've met Clive Tilsley. He's a decent human being. He's decent. Can't stand Mark Pugach. He is woeful as a presenter. He's woeful as a commentator. How has he still got a job? There are some commentators. I like Jonathan Pearce because he used to do the football commentary on Channel 5 back in the day, and he got all the crap assignments for years. Like when he was first commentating on the women's game, no one was listening to it, but I was. Jonathan Pearce is a very, very good commentator. He's got a lot of crap assignments over the years, and he's stuck with commentating, and he hasn't given up. I like Jonathan Pearce. I like Sue Smith, the women commentator on the women's game, because when she was heavily pregnant with one of her kids, they made her run up the stairs to the commentary booth, which I thought was disgusting from the pitch side. Sue Smith and Jonathan Pearce as a commentary tandem on the women's game, absolutely brilliant. If you do have an interest in women's sport, Jonathan Pearce and Sue Smith as a commentary tandem, they are perfect. I've never come across a better commentary tandem in British sport than those two. I like Jermaine Genius as a pundit because he's only fresh out the game, recently retired due to injury a couple of years ago. He's very well spoken, very intelligent. Graham Lasso, when he does any punditry, he's pretty good because he's well spoken. Dean Ashton, he's very good as a pundit. Doesn't get enough airtime. He's really well spoken. And of course, his career was really cut short because of injury. There are some really good pundits and commentators out there who are men who don't get the coverage they deserve. But yeah, no, there are some really terrible commentators, really bad. both on BBC, ITV, Channel 4 and Channel 5. I haven't even got to Sky and BT because BT is just... Jake Humphrey is crap. Jake Humphrey, thank God the BBC binned him off and didn't want to pay him the money he wanted. BT Sport are stuck with him now with his £1 million contract that is looking like a joke. But yeah, there's some really bad commentary out there by men. Absolutely. Phil Neville got a load of abuse, loads of crap. It's just his voice. What he's talking about, he is very, very intelligent. The abuse he got was his delivery. He's not great at public speaking, be it on the radio or on TV. He's just not great at it. What he's talking about is great. He's very intelligent. That's why he's a very good coach with the women's national side. Absolutely. But it's his voice. Nothing to do with what he's talking about. It's just his voice. Mark Lawrenson, he gets a fair bit of slack, but I like Mark Lawrenson. I do. Because he's got that humour in there. He's got a bit of sense of humour in there that some people just don't find funny, but actually it's just called sarcasm. Deal with it. He gets his sarcastic bits in very, very well. But yeah, there's some really bad male commentators. Absolutely. I'd rather see promotion on merit rather than gender, because that's better for equality than just putting women or people of colour in positions just because they're people of colour or they're women. Because if they're not good enough, well, then it doesn't look good. Oh, Alan Shearer, look, he's a boring... If he was an excitable Geordie, would people want to watch that or not? I mean, I love Alan Shearer as a player, as a Blackburn fan, what he did for my club, as an international, as a Newcastle player, as a Southampton player. The clubs he played for, he's well beloved. He's loved by Southampton fans. He's loved by Blackburn fans. He's loved by Newcastle fans. As an international, not as successful as captain as I think he would have liked, but he represented his country with pride. As a pundit, he does have a boring voice. But at the same time, he's exceptionally intelligent about what he talks about. Alan Hansen, I miss him. Get him back on the telly. Alan Hansen was brilliant. Since Alan Hansen retired, the quality of punditry and commentary on British TV is just going down there. American commentators get overexcited about things, and I'm like, really? Like, okay. And half the time they're really, really bad when it comes to commentating on sports that aren't NHL, NFL, Major League Baseball. When they're not commentating on the major sports, they are out of their depth a little bit. But as Major League Soccer and Major League Rugby get better and grow, the commentary will get better. But no, when they do lose it and they go nuts, it is funny, absolutely funny. I like Stephen A. Smith. It is absolutely funny. He is very, very funny. But at the same time, you know, I know a lot of American and Canadian commentators. Bob Cole, the voice of the NHL for 50 odd years, is now retired. You've got Doc Emmerich. There's Pierre Maguire. Oh, I can't stand Pierre Maguire, but you got Don Cherry. Oh, God, grapes. When will he retire? He's old. Don Cherry is like as old as my granddad. He's in mid-80s. He's got to retire at some point because he's becoming more and more out of touch with the modern game and modern society. It's Don Cherry is just an angry man, shouts because he can. It's funny listening to Don Cherry at times, but sometimes it's just painful. And I think there has to come a point where you look at, why is that commentator there? Why is that presenter there? And we're having this debate for the second time on the stream. It's because it's been in the news lately about gender equality and the pay gap. And it's not just in sport, it's across the board. And as I said, the only country which has solved the pay gap in professional sport is Norway. And you've got to look at the amount of professional sportsmen in Norway and women. And you've got to look at the professional teams. There's not that many. There's not huge amounts of money in professional sport in Norway, but they have solved the pay gap by saying women's football, the women get paid the same as the men for the international appearance fee. They've decided to go down the route of eliminating the debate about pay gap. And the Scandinavian countries, Finland, Sweden, Norway, and Denmark, and Iceland, are well ahead of other countries around the world when it comes to equal pay and equal rights. They've been ahead. They've been very liberally progressive for 30, 40 years. They're well ahead of the rest of the Western world. So it's no surprise that Norway, as a sporting country, has eliminated the pay gap between men and women. None. But the debate is not going away when it comes to Fran Kirby raising it the other day, or this morning, or last night in a press conference in the build-up to the Women's World Cup. Now, Fran Kirby is a high-profile women's player, and if she was a man, I have no doubt she would be, a high-profile male player. With the way she plays the game and her backstory, she's local to me. She was only born down the road in Reading. I live in Bracknell. She was only born 14 miles down the road from me, so she's a local lass. She's brought up locally, played for Reading, went to Chelsea. So she is local to the area that I live in, and yeah, she played locally and went to school locally. Crikey, Charlie Austin was born down the road from me as well in Reading. So Charlie Austin is a local lad as well. So looking at top level professional sportsmen and women in this country that have come from the Berkshire area, there are quite a few. And I'm proud to say that I went to school with a guy called Max Laheath, who plays for Bath in the Rugby Union. He used to play for London Irish, local lad. Went to school with him. So I'm really proud that my local area of Berkshire, Surrey, Hampshire, that kind of area, has developed so many great professionals at the top level in both men and women's sport in this country. And yeah, she is a household name when it comes to women's football. A lot of people know who Fran Kirby is. When a household name like that is raising the issue of equal pay and equal exposure, people will take note. But I think the crowd numbers in women's sport aren't there. And this has been going on, as I say, with the women's NBA for 25 years, until people actually do physically want to go to games and enough people go through the turnstiles and buy merchandise and buy tickets and want to have that interest, their pay for women is going to be a lot less than the men, because ticket receipts at lower level of games and lower level of sport, should I say, ticket receipts are vital for the income of a team. Merchandise sales are vital for the income of a team. Until when women's games are on, enough tickets are sold, enough merchandise is sold, they're not going to earn as much money than the men. And the league they play in could face financial difficulties because they can't afford to pay both them equally alongside. If like Fran Kirby was earning 400k a week, there would be, firstly, the Women's Super League here in the UK wouldn't be able to support that kind of sustained salary. That would bankrupt the Women's League within minutes. Literally within a few days, the league would be bankrupt if every female player was to get what a Premier League male player was earning equivalent. That would bankrupt women's football in minutes. As soon as that contract was signed, women's football would be bankrupt. So women's sport, yeah, the athletes could get paid more. I don't think they're ever going to get equal pay with the men, unless you're talking about tennis or possibly golf. If enough women's snooker and pool players got into mixed tournaments, I think they have to go down that route to encourage them, because there are players out there. But the only sports where women can compete on an equal playing field is motorsport, because there are formula where women compete against men and they are paid equally. Not set in stone, but a motor racing contract's a motor racing contract. We see it in touring cars, we've seen it in NASCAR, we've seen it in IndyCar. We've seen F1 women drivers in the past. This Formula W, the women's version of F1 or GP2, is a joke. Tennis, they're arguing for equal pay. And I think the US Open, will be the first competition where they do give equal prize money. Plus, tennis, you've got mixed doubles. So the equal pay argument in tennis is semi-flawed, because you have the mixed doubles competition where the prize money for men and women is actually equal, split 50-50. So, yeah. Tennis and golf. Golf has got the women's tour. The Williams, Serena Williams and Venus Williams. I don't like Serena Williams. I think she actually damages the argument for women's tennis getting paid equally because of her tantrums, her attitude, and just some of her outbursts. I think Serena Williams is a very controversial player. There's debates about, is she taking steroids? Look at her build. I'm not going to lie. The fact she gave birth to a baby and was back within a few weeks, whereas Kim Clijsters and Lindsay Davenport took a year out. So looking at her contemporaries, I am raising that question. And that debate's not going away. Not going to lie. And she had kicks off a fuss about being tested more than everyone else. Well, she keeps winning everything, so the more games you play, the more likely you are to get in competition testing. The more you win, the more likely they are to test you. So her flaw saying, "You're only testing me more because I'm winning more." Well, yeah. Serena Williams is a very controversial figure. She's also one of the wealthiest female sports stars of all time. If she's the one whinging about equal pay, she can sod off. If it was someone like, I don't know, a lower ranked female player, I would follow it. I would back it more, but it wouldn't get the media coverage because she's not a big name. So it's a double-edged sword when you're arguing for equal pay, prize money, because the men's game has also got issues at the lower levels for paying, prize money to tennis players on the world tour. And that's an issue that needs to be sorted out at the lower to mid-range of tennis because there's match fixing all over the place. But women's tennis is one of those sports where you have the mixed doubles, which you don't have in other sports. Same with badminton, you have mixed doubles. So there are other individual sports where there are mixed doubles competitions, where badminton, squash is mixed doubles. So the men and women do play together. So that sort of damages the debate for equal pay when actually you've got a mixed doubles competition where you are paid equally. Men and women get, because they're the doubles, 50-50. They put 50% of the effort in to win that tournament. But no, the debate is there. Women's football, if women's football players, for example, were to be paid the same as men, the women's game would be bankrupt within a week. It would destroy the sport, kill the sport. It would be unsustainable. The foundations are there in the modern era to build something for the future, whereby crowds can be averaging about 5,000 a game, absolutely, and then they might get paid decent money. Well, they are getting paid semi-decent money now, but better money. They could double what they're earning a week, a month, a year. The crowds are not there yet. This is where, yes, the World Cup is crucial to the development of the sport, not just here in England or the UK, but around the world. Outside of the US and Canada, where women's football is reasonably well funded, yeah, if the US or the Canadians don't win and another team wins, that is instrumental to the development of the sport, be it professionally or semi-pro or amateur, and getting people involved and getting the crowds up. Absolutely. But bear in mind, if you look at Spanish sport and European sport, when it talks about a club, it's not just a football club, it's also a badminton club, a swimming club, an athletics club. You look at, if you type in like Atletico Madrid, the actual sporting club, it covers a majority of sports: cycling, tennis, badminton, athletics, weightlifting, boxing. It's a community club. It just so happens that football is the best sport they've got. But yeah, they got 60,000 attendance. It's because, I don't know what it is, they may have marketed it very well. Free tickets is another thing. The FA Cup final, we had 40-odd 5,000. A lot of free tickets given out. That's another issue, is they're dishing out free tickets just to get people in the gate. There's your problem. There's the issue, if we're relying on free tickets. So I'll be interested to see. Yeah, Real Madrid have a basketball and a football team. Yeah, it's a multi-purpose sports club. Atletico Madrid, I think, have a cycling team, badminton, water polo, swimming, boxing. The European style and the South American style of a sports club is you become a member, you pay your membership fee, and then you choose the sport that you want to play. So their facilities will have a weightlifting gym. They will have a boxing ring. They will have swimming pools, table tennis. Yeah, table tennis. They will have table tennis, and you pay your membership, and then you can sign as, you have your membership, and then the better sports become professional. And yeah, Paris Saint-Germain had a rugby league team. So this is the thing. Football clubs here are separate. So I look at my local area. We have an ice hockey club, rugby club, baseball. We do have a baseball team. We have several cricket clubs below Berkshire County Cricket Club. So below Berkshire, there's Bracknell, there's Binfield, there's Wokingham, there's Finchampstead. So we have a multitude of cricket clubs locally. So they're not under one umbrella organisation. They're under each individual club. We have, in Bracknell alone, we've got 4 cricket clubs in the local area that I know of. We've got Warfield, Bracknell, Finchampstead and Wokingham. I think Wokingham have moved to Embrook now, so they're different name. So in the local area within 10 miles of where I live, there's Yateley Cricket Club as well. That's five cricket clubs, at least 3 lawn bowls clubs. So that's old people sport. Multiple snooker and pool leagues in the pub league, so teams. We used to have 2 snooker halls in the local area. Both have shut now. But we did. And I was a member of Riley, so I was a member of the local snooker and pool club until it closed. I was a member, so I could play in competitions, and I did. Then we've got Bracknell Football Club, Bracknell Cavaliers Football Club, Binfield Football Club, Ascot United. So you've got Bracknell Town, Ascot United. You've got Wokingham and Embrook, I think. Sandhurst. One of my mates plays for Sandhurst Ladies. I think 2 of my mates play for Sandhurst Ladies, or played. Then you've got Bracknell Rugby Club, Crowthorne Rugby Club, Camberley Rugby Club, which I collect the bins for. So you've got Camberley Cricket Club. So yeah, there's golf courses where you remember, but none of them are all under one umbrella. As I'm saying here, you've got Reading London Irish, you've got Reading Football Club, you've got Reading Abbey Rugby Club, which I've played at, not for. So you look at that, they're not under one club association, they're all spread out. We had the Thames Valley Tigers basketball team back in the day. So yeah, you look at all the sports clubs and they're all technically a separate standalone sports club. Whereas in Europe, all the sports are under one umbrella. They're under one club structure. And I think it's a cultural thing. I think it started in Europe, especially in Spain. Latin America and Spain have the community sports club dynamic. Other countries have a similar affiliate system where a football club and a rugby club will share the same facilities, but not be the same necessary club, but they'll be sort of affiliate clubs. It varies from country to country, but North America, it's a franchise system. South America, it's very similar to the Spanish, Italian sporting club, kind of everything under one roof, because it was a community thing back in the day. It's a cultural thing. Germany, it's a little bit different. I think they're affiliates. They sort of affiliate with each other, and they do share space like training facilities and sponsorship and possibly ownership, but they're sort of separate, but they're not. So it does vary from country to country. It's a cultural thing. The upcoming Cricket World Cup, it depends on the accessibility of the tournament with the media. I am covering the Women's World Cup football. I'll do my best to cover the cricket and follow as much of the stories as I can. But it's literally to do with the accessibility that the rights, the media rights have. Because they've decided to put cricket behind a paywall over the last 15 years, it's made it harder to follow and to support. And it's putting people off, because before 2005, everyone was loving cricket, was at its most popular, and then they took advantage of that popularity and put it behind a paywall. And now the viewership and the attendances at games are dropping. They were on the up and they're going down, and they have to look at the accessibility of the sport to the wider public when it comes to free-to-air broadcasting, online streaming, and the way the media package is presented to us. But I'll do my best to keep up with the Cricket World Cup as best as I can. But there are some other big sporting events that I am following, and I've got to try and cover a lot of sports all at the same time. So I'll do my best. I'll have to sort of balance it with work and the Women's Football World Cup, and I'll see if I can cover as much as possible over the next couple of weeks and months, because I know it's a 6-week tournament, so it gives me time to catch as much of it as possible. I'll try to listen on the radio and check the updates and see how teams are doing. Afghanistan beating Pakistan yesterday is a big story in itself in the warm-up game. That's a really big statement. Pakistan are great at the short formats of the game, but I have to think that India are going to be, if they can adapt to the conditions, which they didn't do last year in the Test series against England, they can be dangerous. England at home, you've got to look at that kind of home advantage kind of thing, and wanting to do well at home. Bear in mind, we invented the bloody sport, and England have had a very topsy-turvy last couple of years. So if they were to do really well here, that can help going forward, considering some of the negative headlines that some of the players have attracted. But Owen Morgan is injured with a thumb injury, so his fitness is we're going to have to wait and see because he has fractured his thumb. There's been some negative headlines surrounding like Alex Hales and Ben Stokes and Jofra Archer. That's a big divisive issue. Jofra Archer could be the wild card that we have in the pack. Sri Lanka, they've obviously had what's happened in Sri Lanka has had a big effect on the Sri Lankans. New Zealand, what's happened over in Christchurch, has had a big effect on them. I think Bangladesh can be dangerous. I think Australia, they've got Smith and Warner back. How effective will they be, considering they've had so long out of the sport? It could be one of the more open World Cups I think a sport has had ever. I'll do my best to try and cover it as best I can. The Women's Foot World Cup also starts in a little over 2 weeks. So there's 2 big tournaments taking place at the same time. I'll do my best to cover as both. But I have to balance it around my work commitments. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens. But there we go. I'm going to leave that there. I want to say thank you to everyone who's left comments and asked questions. We've had a lot of interesting things to talk about. I didn't get onto one of the topics I wanted to talk about, which was Jack DeBellin in the NRL, and I'll have to do a video on that. Esports. Okay, I'll finish with this esports. There's been a discussion about it before on the channel. The thing is, while I love playing on my Xbox and I like strategy games like Total War, esports, it's getting bigger. It's getting more organised. The prize money is getting better. There's sponsorships available. There's team events. There's individual events. Eventually, yes, I think esports will become massive. We're talking an esports team or esports player earning multi-millions contracts a year. It's an interesting debating point. Professional sports like the NFL, the NHL have linked up with the Fortnite Epic Games. There's a debate, because Fortnite is a free game, whereas other games you have to pay for at first payment. There is a debate about is Fortnite good or bad when it comes to esports. There's a debate about how healthy online gaming is and getting out actually be physically active. I'm going to have to look more into esports and I'll have to do a video on it. Because every other live stream there seems to be the question about esports. So I will leave on this. I will do some research into it, and I will look at the debate about esports. I think I'm going to have to do some research over this bank holiday weekend over here in the UK because I've got a day off on Monday. So I'm going to have to look into the esports topic and do a video on it at some point. Whether I do the research this weekend and take my notes, and next week I do a video, or in the week I do a video after I get in from work. That'll be interesting because the esports debate is there and it is a talking point. So I'm going to leave that there. But thank you to everyone who has watched, left comments, been involved in the debate today. I really appreciate it. If you have any interest in any sports, please check out the playlists on the channel. And there'll be some more up-and-coming videos coming soon. We've had Tranmere promoted to League One. We've had Celtic win the domestic treble for the 3rd year in a row. So there's some football news to talk about. There's also some equal pay in sport. So that's been discussed today, and we'll discuss that on a video as well. And for now, thank you very much for watching. Please like and subscribe. Place your comments below on this video and other videos, and I'll have some more videos for you very, very soon.